My name is Lisa. I'm a 40-year-old housewife. I live with my husband, Mark, who is 2 years older than me, and our cat. We've been married for 15 years now. If you asked me if I was completely happy in my marriage, I'd have to say no. One reason is that we couldn't have children. Another reason is that Mark doesn't earn much, doesn't help with housework, and spends his days off just lazing around at home. On top of that, Mark is a total mama's boy. Even though he's in his 40s, he still goes to visit his mom, Nancy, all the time since she lives nearby. My mom gets lonely since my dad passed away, Mark always says. But I know that's not true. Nancy isn't some poor, weak old lady. She's rude and has a terrible personality. You won't believe this, but the other day, I was in line at the supermarket when I accidentally let out a really loud fart. I was so embarrassed that I quickly turned around, pointed at the person behind me, and said, "Wow, that was so rude." Nancy thought this was hilarious and told Mark about it, laughing the whole time. Mark laughed too, but I just felt disgusted. I couldn't believe these were the people I was stuck with. Nancy doesn't have many friends because of how she treats people. Her favorite hobby seems to be bullying her daughters-in-law. If she were a nice person, I wouldn't mind visiting her house. But no woman would want to spend time with a mother-in-law like that. Mark's brother, Eric, and his wife, Sarah, actually used to live with Nancy. But they ended up running away because Sarah couldn't take it anymore. And honestly, I don't blame her. If Nancy's husband were still alive, maybe living there would have been tolerable. But living alone with her, that would be pure torture. Unlike me, Sarah isn't the type to argue. She's quiet and patient. But even Sarah wanted to escape. So just how bad was Nancy's treatment for even someone like her to run away? The thing is, Eric is just like Mark, another mama's boy. He didn't want to move too far away, so now we all live in separate houses but still close to each other. I don't understand why Mark and Eric are so attached to their mother, but as long as we don't live under the same roof, I can tolerate it. If Nancy ever asks us to move in with her, I'll refuse without hesitation. That was a promise I made to myself. But then the other day, Nancy suddenly called all of us, Mark, Eric, Sarah, and me, to her house. I've decided it's time for us all to live together. When can you move in? She announced. Just like that, she acted like the decision had already been made. She didn't ask if we wanted to move in, only when. Wait a second. I don't want to live with you, Nancy, I said immediately. After seeing how Sarah suffered, there was no way I was going through the same thing. I'm not asking you. I'm asking Mark, Nancy said, completely ignoring me. Excuse me? If we're going to live together, shouldn't I have a say too? But of course, she didn't care what I thought. Well, I don't mind, Mark said. I mean, it would be easier for you to take care of Mom in the future if we all lived together, right? Oh, so that's what this was about. He expected me to take care of Nancy. Me? Take care of Nancy? Are you serious? I asked. After everything Nancy had done to Sarah and me, I was supposed to be the one to take care of her. I sighed. No way. Nancy looked at me in disappointment. Oh, Lisa, how could you say that? I only ever gave you both advice as a more experienced housewife. Advice? That's what she called her bullying. Either way, I refused to live with her. If you insist on moving in together, then I want a divorce, I said. Mark looked shocked. Wait, divorce? Over this? Don't you think you're overreacting? I let out a small laugh. Overreacting? Forcing someone to live with you or making them take care of someone without asking their opinion is definitely a reason for divorce. I had my own job and stable income, so getting a divorce wouldn't bother me at all. Mark had nothing to say after that. Nancy sighed. Well then, I guess I'll just have to ask Eric and Sarah to move back in instead. Sarah immediately panicked. No way. If I have to live with Nancy again, I'll go crazy. I refuse. But this time, Eric started speaking up. Now calm down, Sarah. Mom might have been a little strict before, but she only did it for your own good. She's sorry now. Sorry? She didn't look sorry. Exactly, Nancy said. I mean, Sarah, you never fight back when I talk to you. That's no fun. So let me get this straight. If a daughter-in-law is outspoken, that's a problem. But if she's quiet, that's also a problem. Unbelievable. That's right. You should think about your own mistakes too, Nancy added. What? Sarah was completely shocked by Eric's unbelievable words. I stood beside her, just as stunned, unable to say anything. Besides, Sarah, you've been a housewife your whole life. If you get divorced, you'll be in big trouble right away. It's not like you have a job like Lisa, Eric added. Nancy jumped in. Exactly. Sarah, if you keep acting selfish, Eric might leave you. And let's be honest, a woman who isn't young or slim doesn't have many options. What would you do then? I wondered, what exactly was Nancy supposed to be sorry about? Because right now she looked like she was having fun. Sarah, you were cute when you were younger, but now you've gained weight. Come to think of it, isn't this the season when sea lions start moving around? Nancy smirked. Sea lions. Oh, that's a good one. Eric laughed. Excuse me? Are you calling me a sea lion? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and I reached out to comfort her. But Nancy and Eric kept going. Oh, stop being so sensitive. I was just talking about actual sea lions, right, Eric? They flap their flippers and make noises, just like her. To my shock, both Nancy and Eric started imitating a sea lion, making loud flapping gestures and fake cries. Stop it. What is wrong with you people? I shouted, but Sarah had already run out of the house in tears. I turned to Nancy, furious. This is exactly why neither Sarah nor I want to live with you. And then Mark spoke up. You think you're so special just because you have a job. But let's be real, if you got divorced, you'd end up struggling just like Sarah. Don't you dare use divorce as a threat. He glared at me. Sure, I was in a better position than Sarah. But that didn't mean I could just walk away so easily. But no matter what, I wasn't going to live with Nancy. Without another word, I turned and ran out of the house. I decided to find Sarah and comfort her. After searching for a bit, I found Sarah walking down the sidewalk. Sarah. Oh, Lisa. Her face was full of tears. I helped calm Sarah down, and we went to a nearby coffee shop. Sarah. I can't take it anymore. Eric has been so cruel to me, and he doesn't help me at all. I understood exactly what she meant. Me? Yeah. Eric and Mark are both Mama's boys, aren't they? Sarah. If it was just the words, I could deal with it. But I can't stand it anymore, knowing Eric is cheating on me, and now Nancy is helping him with it. At Sarah's sudden revelation about Eric's affair, I was in shock. Me? What? Wait, what? Sarah. Yeah, Eric's having an affair, and Nancy is helping him. Me. You didn't know. Eric's been cheating on me for years. He kept saying he was going to see Nancy, but he was actually with his mistress. And Nancy knew all along, even helping him cover it up. Sarah was in tears, letting all her frustrations out. I felt so bad for her. She was being mistreated by Nancy and betrayed by her own husband. Me. I get why you feel this way, Sarah. I'm so sorry you've had to deal with this. But why did you put up with it? No matter how worried you are about your future, you shouldn't have to live like this. I thought I was helping, but Sarah looked at me with a questioning expression. Sarah. Why am I putting up with it? It's the same for you, right? Me? Huh. Then Sarah told me a shocking story. After hearing everything, we decided we had to team up and stand up to Nancy and our husbands. We couldn't keep letting them treat us like this, and we wouldn't stay silent anymore. We were going to make them pay for everything they'd done. 1 month later, Nancy called us all over to her house again. Since then, Sarah and I had been quietly preparing without telling our husbands. This was the perfect time. We all headed to Nancy's house. Nancy. Well, I fought it through. One of you will have to move in with me. Nancy brought up living together again. Nancy. I'm getting old, and eventually, one of my daughters-in-law will have to take care of me. It's better to start getting used to it now. Sarah spoke up right away. Sarah. I don't want to live with you, Nancy. I will never live with you. If we have to live together, I'll get a divorce. Her tone was so firm that even Nancy seemed surprised. Nancy. What about you, Lisa? With Sarah's refusal, Nancy turned to me. Me. So you want us to live with you just so we can take care of you, right? Nancy. Well, that's part of it, but I'm also lonely. I prefer living with either Eric or Mark. Since Sarah and I kept saying no, Nancy was getting angrier. Nancy. Are you really saying you can't do something as simple as living with your own mother-in-law? Well, I'm ordering you to live with me. I'll move in with my son, so you have to live with me. Sarah and I exchanged looks and nodded. Me. I won't do it. But how about these people instead? I spread some photos across the table. Eric and Mark immediately panicked. Those photos were proof. They showed both of them cheating, going into hotels with other women, kissing in parks, and more. Me. You two were both cheating on us. You two are so close, huh? And I heard Nancy knew all about it. Sarah. Even though Nancy knew, she helped them create alibis. How could she ask us to live with her and take care of her after all this? Sarah nodded next to me. Sarah. If you want someone to take care of you, Nancy, ask these women in the photos. We're both divorcing you, so we won't live with you or take care of you. Nancy started to panic. Nancy. Trouble? We're not the ones in trouble, right, Sarah? Sarah smiled. Eric. Hey, Sarah, if you divorce me, you'll be the one in trouble. No housewife can survive alone. Eric started yelling. He probably thought we'd back down like before, but we weren't having it anymore. Sarah. Oh, I'm not the one in trouble here. I'm planning on getting alimony from you, Eric. Eric? What? Sarah. I'm also going after the woman you cheated on me with. That should help cover the cost of renting a small apartment and getting my life back on track. I'll work hard to find a job, but I'm going to do everything I can to make it on my own. Me. Oh, Sarah, don't worry. I'll be here to support and help you. Sarah and I had already agreed to work together and support each other through this mess. With my savings, we'd be able to manage for now. If Sarah got alimony from Eric and his mistress, she'd pay me back with a little interest. Me. Oh, and Mark, I'll be asking for alimony from you too, and from the woman you cheated on me with. Mark looked at me, clearly regretting everything. Mark. I'm so sorry. It was just a fling, just for fun. It wasn't anything serious. Me. Serious or not, cheating is cheating. We've already talked to our lawyer, so you can make all the excuses you want. To them. I handed both Mark and Eric a business card for our lawyer. We'd signed up with 2 lawyers at the same time and even got a small discount for hiring them together. It was a clever housewife's trick. Mark and Eric. Wait, hold on. Let's talk about this. Just, not a divorce. Please? We'll apologize. We're sorry. Both of them dropped to their knees, begging. Nancy, however, was furious. Nancy. Fine. If you both want a divorce, then go ahead. I'm not going to put up with daughters-in-law who can't even tolerate their husband's affairs. Sarah laughed. Before I knew it, she was completely confident. Sarah. Nancy, you sure tolerate affairs well. Is it because you know what it feels like to have one? Nancy flinched, clearly caught off guard. Nancy. Do you what? What are you talking about? Sarah. I heard you had an affair too. I heard from one of your neighbors that you had an affair with a part-time worker at Mark's swim club. Seriously, what is wrong with your family? Compared to all of you, father-in-law was actually a decent guy. Nancy's face turned pale. Who told you that? She demanded. I just smiled. Why don't you ask around and find out for yourself? Sarah and I stood up together. Well, we're going back to pack our things, so we'll be leaving now, I said. Then with a big grin, I added, oh, and don't forget to keep doing your sea lion impression. It really suits you. We left and headed home, where we had already packed our bags. We had signed a lease for an apartment, so we planned to meet there. Mark kept calling me and Eric kept calling Sarah. But we ignored them and let our lawyer handle everything. A little while later, our divorces were finalized and we received our alimony. Nancy's plan to have us take care of her completely fell apart. Instead, she had to rely on her 2 sons, and now Eric and Mark were fighting over who would take care of her. Messages from Eric and Mark. Please come home. I'm really sorry. Let's start over again. I'll wait for you forever at that restaurant where we used to go for our dates. Eric and Mark kept texting us, begging us to come back. Every night after work, Sarah and I would have a drink together and laugh at their desperate messages. Hey Sarah, where is that restaurant Eric mentioned? I asked one evening. I have no idea, Sarah replied. The place we used to go to on dates closed down a long time ago. I don't know what he's talking about. Sarah and I lived together for a while, but once she found a job, she moved into her own place. We are still best friends and always support each other. Now I'm living a peaceful life, sipping coffee and petting my cat.
Sharon tasted the newly cooked soup, wrinkled her nose, and irritably threw the spoon into the sink. Too salty, and the taste is all wrong, sweetish like some vegetable compote. The over-salted, sweet-smelling soup, which might only appeal to someone fond of Asian cuisine, was just another mark in today's absurdly frustrating day. Things had gone downhill from the very start. She'd woken suddenly at 6:30 a.m., despite having 3 more hours to sleep, particularly annoying on her first day of vacation. After suffering until dawn, she finally dragged herself out of bed, feeling far from refreshed, dropped a cream bottle in the bathroom, broke a fingernail, and, as the crowning achievement, burned an ugly hole in her perfectly wearable blouse. Looking at the melted, wrinkled fabric, Sharon questioned herself. Why had she needed to iron this blouse right now? There was no answer, yet the ruined garment, one of the few that truly suited her, was proof of her folly. She'd tried to make peace with the universe by cooking soup, which Denny always called her culinary masterpiece. But instead of its usual rich, noble taste, she'd produced this sweetly salty disaster. Sharon finally accepted that today was definitely not her day. Such days, when nothing worked and everything went wrong, had become frighteningly frequent lately. It was time to face the truth. It was about state of mind and her mood, which were far from normal. For days now, she had thought of nothing but her husband and her place in his life, if she still had one at all. Though Sharon had no concrete evidence for her doubts, she sensed that proof wouldn't be long in coming. Why beat around the bush? Denny is cheating on me, I'm certain of it. We've been together for 10 years, and I always thought our relationship was genuine and strong. I loved him, worried about him, cared for him, tried to be a good wife. Just look at my cooking journey. I spent years injuring my fingers, nearly cutting off my pinky while carving a chicken, burned myself countless times, cursed humanity's need to eat daily, wasted mountains on food, and repeatedly clogged the kitchen drain. But I persevered. From someone who mangled potatoes rather than peeled them, I became an excellent cook. I'll never forget Denny saying, "Sharon, this is a masterpiece, better than Mum's stew." These past 10 years held so much, good and bad, sad and funny. We were truly together through it all. Wasn't I there when his best friend since childhood, practically his brother, died, and Denny was so shocked he couldn't even button his shirt? Or when he quarrelled with his foolish boss, quit on the spot, and suddenly found himself unemployed with a mortgage to pay? Did I reproach him? No, I understood and supported him, though I privately wished he could have been less principled and more tactful when needed. And what about his complete inability to handle household repairs? Did I ever reproach him for that? I could have, especially given my kitchen triumphs. Denny was genuinely hopeless at home maintenance, though he eagerly attempted everything, fixing appliances, clearing drains, mounting shelves. After several mishaps that left our home master with minor injuries, I decided we'd simply call professionals when needed. Denny was precious to me, just as he was. And how could I forget his devotion when I slipped on spring ice and broke my leg? The care and love he showed me, stuffing me with fruit, seafood, nuts and supplements after learning about my tendency toward fractures. Then there was that painful memory in Sharon's mind, their dreams of children, or even just one child. Everyone around them had children, but for her and Denny this remained elusive. "Are you going to leave me now?" she asked, looking away. "Why should I?" he wondered. "Or have you found a suitable excuse to get rid of me?" "Stop it, I'm serious. Why would you want to tie yourself to a barren woman like me?" Sharon grinned bitterly. "I don't even know. I'll have to think about it." Denny looked at his wife very seriously. I should make a list of your shortcomings and merits, and see which weighs more. Oh, well, it's already made. He took a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and studied it carefully. Well, it's a lot of faults for one man, but you know what outweighs everything? I love you. And the baby? Well, there are many other ways, aren't there? We'll get ready and try. At the very least, we'll adopt. How she loved him at that moment. Then there was that unforgettable day when they bought an enormous, expensive sofa, only to realise after delivery that this monstrous masterpiece of furniture craft wouldn't fit through their entryway door. Denny refused to return it, declaring it a matter of honour. Either he would conquer the sofa, or the sofa would conquer him. They spent the evening sitting on their purchase outside the entrance, embracing, while bewildered passers-by and neighbours watched them wait for some miracle worker who could disassemble it without damage. It became one of the best evenings of their lives, followed by one of their best nights. Their first New Year's Eve as husband and wife was another magical night. Driving to the friend's country house, they got completely lost in snow-covered village alleys, finally stalling in a snowdrift minutes before midnight. They passed champagne between them, drinking from the bottle, eating tangerines and gazing into each other's eyes. Soft snowflakes descended silently, settling on Denny's hair and shoulders, glistening on his brow. Their tangerine and wine-scented breath mingled in the frosty air. It was the most enchanting night of Sharon's life. How many such precious moments lie stored in Sharon's memory, distant yet unforgotten. Though truth be told, Denny isn't exactly the easiest husband. His quirks would have sent another woman running long ago. Take his obsession with fishing and hunting. Why would a modern, prosperous man be drawn to such primitive pursuits? What drives him to regularly escape to the wilderness, sitting for days in mud and water, catching colds and developing calluses? And the money spent on these hobbies, the spinning rods, lures, and endless equipment. She discovered just how expensive his passion was when she decided to buy him a genuine leather hunting bag for his birthday. The purchase not only consumed her entire gift budget, but depleted her shoe fund too. Though Denny later solved that problem by buying her the shoes, the cost of hunting gear continued to astound her. But the worst began when Denny's hunting or fishing trips were successful, and he returned home with his spoils. Horrible, dirty, unbearably stinking bags lay on the hallway floor, and the washing machine hummed, trying to cope with impossibly dirty clothes. She began to feel like a caveman's wife, smelling of wet feathers, with fish scales stuck to her feet. After all the torment, patience, and heroic struggle with fish and game, a plate of duck pâté or fried pieces of wild meat would be proudly placed on the table. "Sharon, try it, please," said the hunter, looking at her with transparent, rapturous eyes. Sharon, completely intolerant of the game, opened her mouth to refuse, but looking at her favourite man, his eyes full of pride and childlike hope, she suddenly felt as if she were about to offend a child. The tasting always ended with her expressions of delight, and his assurances that he would bring more next time. She could only be grateful they didn't live in Africa, where Denny might bring home part of an elephant carcass as a trophy. Though, to be honest, she wasn't exactly easy to live with either. Denny could probably say a thing or two about her passion for orchids. She adored these beautiful flowers, which reminded her of miniature elf and fairy faces. Sharon's home collection contained more than 40 orchids, and Denny courageously tolerated this arrangement. Whenever he bumped into yet another pot that had suddenly appeared before him, he would freeze in terror. The almost weightless, unstable orchid pots were surprisingly easy to overturn, and Denny clearly didn't want to risk his life and family harmony by knocking some rare cattleya off the windowsill, especially since these falls always left traces of soil that he could never successfully hide. But who really minds orchids? They stand quietly and peacefully in their places, frightening no one. The same couldn't be said about her dear husband's other hobby, his obsession with hockey. That was something truly difficult to endure. Just imagine this well-mannered, polite, intelligent man who normally maintained perfect self-control would, several times a year, transform into a screaming, jumping, curse and blessing, spewing madman. In their first year together, Sharon barely survived until the end of the World Hockey Championship. Though Denny watched it on television, he shouted as if their apartment contained the entire crowded stadium. "Denny, how often do they play the World Cup?" Sharon asked cautiously. "Every year," Denny replied, rubbing his hands together. But, as they say, if you can't beat it, join it. And Sharon made a strategic decision to become part of hockey, or rather a fan. She prepared thoroughly, reading several articles and studying the national team's roster before resolutely sitting down one evening beside her nervously fidgeting husband. "Listen, where's he going? Look at number 5. He's a defenceman, but he's moving to the left, forward position," she suddenly declared in an authoritative tone, eyeing her raging spouse with an expert's look. "Now he'll interfere. If we play like this against the Swedes, what chance do we have?" Denny froze. Even if a flying saucer had landed right then and a greenish humanoid had emerged waving a webbed paw, he couldn't have looked more astonished. "You think so?" he managed to squeeze out. "Of course," Sharon declared authoritatively. "There are simply no other options. Why mess with what works? Don't you agree?" Denny nodded respectfully, smiled uncertainly, and carefully slid the cup of chips toward her. A few days later they were both jumping on the couch and yelling like crazy people. Sharon had become just like Denny, freaking out, counting down to the final siren, cursing at the referee's mistakes, and consuming so much junk food during matches that the next day she'd anxiously calculate how many hours of squats it would take to burn off all those calories. Despite finding herself unwillingly drawn into the frenzy of hockey, Sharon managed to exact her revenge. "Sharon, I am shocked," he exclaimed upon seeing yet another dark, handsome Eastern prince on the television screen. "You are an intelligent person. How can you possibly watch this nonsense?" Sharon had a deep affection for Turkish soap operas. They had utterly captivated her. "So what?" Sharon retorted, defending her idols. "It's not nonsense, it's life." "Oh, really?" Denny sarcastically responded, sitting down next to her and looking at the screen. "Life? Let's see, who is this, for example?" "That's the main heroine. She's a poor girl. Her mother is forcing her to marry a rich man she doesn't love. But she loves a poor man just like herself. They've been friends since childhood, and now she's sitting at home alone and miserable," Sharon eagerly explained. "Poor? Sitting at home? Of course, in a 3-story villa with a pool. You know, I wouldn't mind being poor like that. And what's that around her neck? Sharon, if she sold that rock, she could live comfortably for the rest of her life without needing any husband, rich or poor." Denny laughed. "Oh, I can't take this seriously. Sharon, how can you watch this?" "Fool," Sharon muttered under her breath, stubbornly fixating her gaze on the television. Yet despite his initial disdain, Denny frequently became an unwilling witness to these Turkish dramas set against the backdrop of the Turkish seas, and gradually found himself drawn into this world. One day, Sharon invited 2 of her childhood friends over. They sat in the kitchen, enjoying cake and chatting about everything under the sun. Naturally, the conversation turned to their favourite soap operas. "Oh, girls," one of them sighed dreamily. "While I was home with the flu, I watched Endless Love. It was so interesting. My favourite, Burak Özçivit, was in it, looking so handsome with his beard. He's just perfect." "What are you talking about, Cassandra?" Denny suddenly interjected, entering the kitchen to open another bottle of wine for the ladies. "That's not Burak Astyevet, that's Burak Deniz. He's the one with the curly hair who stars in all those silly shows for teenage girls. Burak Astyevet is a serious actor, with respectable films like The Magnificent Century and Osman. And there's that other one, Sharon, the one with your favourite plot about Rich Nihat and poor Kemal." The women sitting in the kitchen collectively sighed in admiration, while Denny, cursing his loose tongue, blushed deeply and hurriedly left the room. And so they lived. Sharon cheered for the national hockey team, ate game meat and bony riverfish, and cooked soups. Denny battled household repairs, secretly watched Turkish dramas, dodged suddenly appearing orchids, and enjoyed Sharon's cooking. Sharon gazed at a photograph hanging on the wall in a frame. The photo captured a moment when neither she nor Denny knew they were being photographed. Denny was embracing her with both arms, kissing her neck, while she, half turned towards the camera, was laughing. It was clear that these two were happy and content with each other. Sharon's gaze shifted from the photograph to a small sheet of graph paper. This sheet, folded several times, had fallen out of Denny's pocket the day before, unnoticed by him in the dim light of the hallway. On the paper, written in Denny's hand, were dates and names. It didn't take a brilliant analyst to figure out that this was some sort of schedule for the next few days. For example, tomorrow, Tuesday, there's something scheduled called G. Judging by the context, that must be the gym. Thursday, P. On Friday, there's an art exhibition at the art gallery. Oh, that's even written without abbreviations. It must be a critical event. But I wonder, since when has he become so interested in painting? Next to each date was the capital letter D, and next to the gym, pool and gallery was the letter T. Obviously, these were the initials of names. D must be Diana, and T is probably Tracy? Poor thing, he even has to write down the women's names to keep track. Sharon crumpled the unfortunate piece of paper in her fist and then angrily tossed it away. The crumpled ball of paper hit the floor with a soft thud and rolled slightly to the side. Sharon couldn't hold back any longer. She buried her face in her hands and cried bitterly. But then, catching herself, she resolutely wiped her face and stared angrily out the window. Sharon was born into a family of doctors. Her parents worked in the city hospital performing surgeries, working round-the-clock shifts, conducting consultations. It was a mystery how they maintained their cheerfulness, given their workload. Sharon adored her parents, though when any adults asked, "Sharon, when you grow up, will you become a doctor like your mum and dad?" her immediate and firm response was always, "No, of course not." "But why?" "Because I want to see my children more than once a week," Sharon would retort, effectively ending any further discussion on the topic. Since childhood, she was rather lazy, content to go with the flow, dabbling in one thing after another and studying just enough to avoid scolding. After graduation, she enrolled in a pedagogical college, solely because her father secured a targeted admission for her. Serenity was Sharon's primary life goal. "Sharon, you should have been born a couch cushion," her close friend Cassandra would laugh. "You'd just lie there on your side, not thinking about anything." Once, with a large and boisterous group of friends, they spontaneously decided to go to the sea. Just a couple of hours on the plane, and there it was, vast, beautiful, gentle, and warm. That evening, Sharon declined to join her friends for dinner at a restaurant. For some reason, she wanted to be alone, to stroll along the nearly deserted and unusually quiet beach after 9. She slowly walked along the very edge of the water, where the sand, recently covered by a retreating wave, was wet and pleasantly cooled her feet. She held onto her hat, just in case. Of course, the accessory was chic, but honestly very impractical. The wide brim billowed like sails, and at the slightest breeze the hat tried to fly away. Several times Sharon had already chased the runaway hat across the beach, naturally looking ridiculous and weird. Suddenly she felt something explode in her head, and seawater rushed into her ears and mouth. Confused and disoriented, she tried to scream, but only swallowed more water. Sharon might have become the first vacationer in history to drown in shallow water, but fortunately that didn't happen. The next moment she felt strong arms beneath her, pulling her up towards the air. She desperately clung to one of those saving arms and suddenly heard a soft, pleading voice. "Miss, please let go. You're digging your nails into my arm. It hurts." She fearfully released her grip and looked at the speaker. Immediately, everything became even worse than before. He might not have been the actor from her favourite Turkish series, but he was undeniably handsome. He had chiselled features, light hair, possibly bleached by the sun, grey, slightly squinted eyes and very tanned skin that made his white smile stand out even more. His broad shoulders and fluid, powerful movements made him almost perfect. "Excuse me, where are you taking me? I mean, us. What's happening?" she finally asked. The man, probably in his early 30s, looked down at her with a strange expression. "Where? To a medical station, of course. You have half a bottle sticking out of your leg," he rasped. Sharon elegantly brushed the wet, sandy strands of hair from her face, looked at her leg, strangely wrapped in her own scarf, and nearly fainted. A large shard of thick bottle glass was indeed embedded in her foot, and it showed no signs of coming out on its own. "Don't you feel anything at all?" he asked in surprise. "No, it must be shock," she authoritatively declared, being the daughter of doctors, and finally lost consciousness. She woke up on a couch, and unfortunately, instead of the face of the beach macho, a funny red head with a dishevelled beard loomed over her. "What happened to me? Where am I?" Sharon asked nonsensically. "You're in the hospital," the man patiently explained. "You have a foot injury, so I'm afraid your active vacation is over. But don't worry, your knight will return soon and help you." "My what?" she asked fearfully. "Knight, the guy who brought you here. He's a real hero. I tell you, first, it's a good 3 kilometres from here to the shore. Second, it's good he didn't pull out the glass. You would have bled out. Besides, here he is." Her saviour was dressed in white shorts and a light checked shirt, with sunglasses perched on his nose, looking even more handsome than Sharon remembered. Now he was truly comparable to her idols from Turkish melodramas. Sharon awkwardly sat up and carefully lowered her feet to the floor. Her tightly bandaged leg throbbed, and a sharp pain shot through it as it touched the surface. "Ouch!" she cried out, looking pitifully at the doctor. "Does it hurt?" She heard the familiar soft voice and turned to look at the man. He stood before her, smiling as if seeing her dishevelled with smeared mascara was the greatest joy of his life. Denny turned out to be a resident. His family had a small house near the sea, where he lived with his mother. He visited Sharon every day, bringing flowers, oranges, ice cream, and driving her along the coast in an old rattling car. He was always eager to carry her in his arms. They would stop at small cafes with tables facing the sea, sit under striped awnings, and enjoy incredibly delicious pastries. "Denny, I want to lose weight on this vacation," she lamented, taking another bite of the delicious local cuisine. "Nonsense! You look wonderful. You don't need to lose weight at all," Denny smiled, offering her a scoop of ice cream. They would sit side by side on the shore, listening to the sea, feeling that the world around them had changed forever. "Sharon, I love you and want you to be my wife," Denny declared after a week of knowing her. "What? Are you crazy? We've known each other for 7 days. No, you're definitely insane," she exclaimed. as shocked and stunned as when she fell into the sea. "Not 7, almost 8. And it doesn't matter if we've known each other for 8 days, months or years." He smiled. "But I can't stay here with you. I have to go home. I have a job, a contract," she cried, feeling both helpless and joyful. She thought this strange, incredible, unbelievable situation would simply resolve itself because Denny would say, "Well, if you can't, you can't. Bye." Instead, he was silent for a long time, then stubbornly shook his head and said, "If you can't stay, then I'll come with you. I can't live without you. So, will you marry me?" "Are you crazy? Leave here? Leave the sea, the sun, for our land of snow and mosquitoes? No, you're definitely crazy, and I'm just as crazy as you are." "Of course. I agree," Sharon replied. To Sharon's amazement, Denny actually moved to her hometown. Somehow, within a few days, he charmed all her friends and relatives, gaining their full support and her parents' blessing. "What a wonderful man!" exclaimed Cassandra, a woman quite sceptical about men, considering them only suitable for procreation. "Just amazing! What did he see in you?" Cassandra suddenly declared. "What do you mean?" Sharon was offended. "In the direct sense," Cassandra replied frankly. "Sharon, you two are entirely different. You're lazy and indecisive. Oh, don't pretend to be offended. Who else will tell you the truth? And he's like a spring, a perpetual motion machine. Come on, Sharon, get off the couch, or you won't keep up with him." Sharon thought long and hard about her friend's words. Undoubtedly, Cassandra was right. She and Denny were very different, and the longer they lived together, the more noticeable the difference became. She was lazy. There was no denying it. This laziness manifested not only in her lifestyle, but also in her thoughts. Problems that arose in her life she preferred to solve in a simple and universal way. She stopped thinking about them, at least for a while. Denny was the opposite. It seemed that for Denny there were no problems that could seriously challenge him. He simply set a task and solved it in the shortest possible time, so quickly that Sharon sometimes didn't even have an opportunity to fully grasp the task itself. Denny was a programmer of some kind of software specialist, an IT guy, as they say, and finding a job was no problem for him. Just a couple of days after his final move, he was getting ready to go somewhere, sipping coffee from a huge mug. "And where are you going?" Sharon asked in surprise. In her mind, someone who had so radically changed their lives needed at least 6 months just to get their bearings, adjust to the new environment, and consider their options. "Where am I going?" Denny asked, surprised. "To work, of course. I may be a young husband, but I have no intention of living off my wife. By the way, I bumped my elbow on the corner 3 times while shaving. Sharon, your bathroom is impossibly small, and so is the whole apartment. Let's expand." "Right now?" she asked, frightened. The apartment had been inherited from her grandmother and was indeed very small. "There's nothing complicated or terrible about it. The main thing is to start. I've already calculated and planned everything. Look, we sell this mini apartment." He chuckled. "I have about the same amount in cash. We take out a loan to cover the rest, and we buy a normal, spacious 3-bedroom apartment. So don't plan anything for Sunday. We're going to look at options." "What options?" Sharon asked, even more frightened. "Apartment options, Sharon," Denny nodded. "Why do we need a 3-bedroom apartment?" she continued, afraid. "Denny, that's a lot of money. And what do we need 3 rooms for? It would take all day just to dust them." "Honey, we won't always be just the 2 of us. I intend to seriously consider expanding our family. Sharon, we're going to have children. And as for the money, don't worry about it. Don't worry about anything. Everything will be fine." He did everything so quickly and decisively, whether it was getting married, moving to a new city, buying an apartment, getting a loan or finding a job. Within a month, they moved into a large, bright apartment with a huge balcony. It was harder to get used to Denny's pace of life, which Sharon found abnormal. Her friend Cassandra's predictions were coming true. She was indeed tired with keeping up with her husband. He always needed to do something, go somewhere, or meet someone. And he wanted to do all of this with her. "Sharon, I'm going to the gym this evening. Are you coming?" Denny said before leaving for work this morning. "No, I'm not going today," Sharon said with a tensed smile. "Are you sure?" he asked, looking at his wife and sighing. "Absolutely." She smiled even wider, while her thoughts raced. "I wonder what would happen if I said I was going. Would he have to cancel his meeting with Dee? What a nerve. And he's so sure I won't go to the club. Well, I'll show him. I'll go, but not the way he thinks. And I'll see what kind of sport my dear husband is really into. Why is he so obsessed with that gym? Why do people hate themselves so much that they're willing to torture their muscles and ligaments with iron machines?" Sharon understood the need for physical activity and recognised the role of sports in people's lives. However, she was terrified of gyms, mainly because of the people who looked like they had been going there for years. Everyone was incredibly thin, slim and muscular, making Sharon and people like her feel like representatives of a poor, backward, dead-end branch of evolution. So later that day, Sharon got to the sports complex where she and Denny had memberships. Trying to blend into the background, she hid behind a huge lady who pedalled merrily. Denny entered the gym, worked out diligently, sweated on the treadmill, and disappeared into the locker room. Neither Dee nor T ever appeared, and Denny showed no interest in any of the ladies present. On Thursday she dragged herself to the pool, where it was Denny's next training session. "Well, today someone will definitely be there, because he didn't even call me to go with him," she thought resentfully. Denny was already there, swimming laps in the pool, his broad shoulders and white cap periodically visible as Sharon cautiously kept her distance. A couple of times she thought Denny was looking in her direction, and she quickly ducked underwater, her heart pounding. Yet all her efforts were in vain. He didn't meet anyone. "Doesn't mean anything," Sharon thought stubbornly. "No normal woman wants a date at the pool. But the art gallery, that's a different story. Sharon, will you come with me to the gallery on Friday?" Denny suddenly asked later that evening. "Why should I?" She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Why? I told you, Tom has an exhibition. You remember my buddy, don't you? I told you about him. We met about 15 years ago when he came to paint seascapes. He didn't have a penny, so he lived with us, and as payment, he painted my mum's portrait. Great guy. So, he has a solo exhibition." What an art connoisseur! Tom asked him to come. A very convenient excuse to sneak out of the house, Sharon thought to herself, but said, "No, darling, I feel bad. Probably ate something not fresh. Have a nice time." The exhibition was unexpectedly crowded. It turned out that Tom had indeed become a decent artist. Otherwise, how else could one explain the numerous groups of people standing in front of the paintings, looking at them meaningfully, nodding their heads, and speaking softly to each other? "Yes, he has become much stronger in composition, certainly. And the colour palette, have you noticed? Amazingly well crafted. And what precise control of tone." The popularity of the artist turned out to be Sharon's advantage. At least she managed to hide among the exhibition visitors, while keeping an eye on her broad-shouldered husband in his perfectly fitting suit. And something went wrong again. Women constantly appeared near Denny, and many of them were very attractive. He smiled, talked, even kissed a couple of ladies' hands, But all this was not suspicious at all. Finally he hugged someone, but the object of his affection was not some beautiful woman, but a tall, bald man with a long nose. It turned out to be the exhibition's host, Tom, with whom Denny had been friends for many years. So, what if he hasn't met any women? It means nothing. Anyway, it's better to leave now so as not to run into him. "You shouldn't have refused to go to the exhibition, Sharon," he said when he got home. "It was a very decent event. Tom, it turns out, is already a well-renowned artist. That's probably why they served delicious canapes at the buffet. So you missed a lot. You know, though," he suddenly tensed up and spoke ingratiatingly, unbuttoning his shirt suspiciously quickly, "I missed you so much." In general, the next half an hour, Sharon was not up to suspicions. But they came to life again as soon as Denny brought up the subject of vacation. They had been arguing about it for days. Denny was trying to persuade Sharon to go to the sea, but for some reason she refused. "You know, Sharon, I'm going to fly out," Denny suddenly announced. "I haven't seen my mum in a long time. I miss her. And besides, I'm really sorry to waste my vacation on staying in town." "Well, go ahead," Sharon muttered. "Of course, that's it. Why meet with his D or T whenever, risking being seen by someone they know, when he can fly away for a whole week and enjoy himself to the fullest? Now everything makes sense. Everything." Denny soon flew away, and Sharon stayed behind. Denny's mother, Mrs. Barber, still lived in the seaside town. Over the years, Sharon and Denny had, of course, visited her several times. Sharon had developed a wonderful relationship with her mother-in-law, quite unlike the typical portrayal of such interactions. Mrs. Barber was a cheerful, lively woman who had worked all her life as a music teacher. "Oh, I'm so glad that Denny finally has a beloved girlfriend," she declared after a few minutes of getting to know Sharon. "I must admit I was starting to worry that I would never live to see this day." "Why?" Sharon asked in amazement. "Because my son is already 28 years old, and he has never introduced me to anyone," Mrs. Barber laughed. "Can you imagine, Sharon?" "Honestly, no, I can't imagine." Sharon shook her head. "He is so handsome, strong, smart. Women must have fought for him." "They were," Mrs. Barber laughed again. But Denny always brushed them off, saying, "Mum, this is not it at all. I was honestly starting to worry. And then finally there's you, Sharon. It seems he was waiting for you all these years." It was clear that even if the stories about monstrous mother-in-laws were true, Mrs. Barber was not one of them. She had no intention of fighting with her son's chosen one, teaching her about life, or claiming to be anything more than just his mother. Even after it became clear that there would be no grandchildren in the foreseeable future, she found the strength to genuinely support her unfortunate daughter-in-law. "Well, Sharon," she said, "I won't hide the fact that this is sorrowful for all of us. But we will still hope, right? Don't you dare give up, and don't surrender." She even knocked her fist on the table in emphasis. "Don't you think it would be better for Denny to break up with me?" Sharon suddenly asked. Without losing her composure for a second, Mrs. Barber looked at her seriously. "Maybe, but I know one thing. My son loves you very much. Sharon, he is happy with you. I know it, and I see it. And what you have already given him is more important to him than what you cannot give him yet." After a night of remembering conversations with her mother-in-law and wrestling with tormenting suspicions, Sharon dialed her number. "Sharon, dear, how wonderful to hear from you. We haven't seen each other in so long. Why didn't you come with Denny?" "Oh, I couldn't make it. I have so many things to do. And besides, do you know where Denny is? His phone isn't answering for some reason." "Oh, he's been acting strangely this time. He's always going somewhere, running around. We haven't even had a proper conversation since he arrived. And he kept talking about some critical meeting. He bought a new suit yesterday, a white shirt. It's like he didn't come to the seaside, but to some symposium. Your beloved son didn't come to a symposium, but to a date, Sharon almost blurted out. Of course, I will ask him to call you right away. Are you sure you're okay, Sharon? You sound sad, Mrs. Barber said, clearly worried. Finally noticed, Sharon thought. If only I could tell you, dear mother-in-law. But I will see him in the evening only, Mrs. Barber continued. He warned me that he would be late. His friend is opening a new restaurant on the promenade, and when he found out that Denny had arrived, he came begging for help. You know our Denny. Who could he ever refuse to help? Denny spends whole days there, installing some computer programs for them. It's called the Evening Breeze. Denny thinks it will become the best place in town. Oh, I've kept you listening to my endless talking for so long. Sharon, I just haven't seen you in so long. I will definitely tell Denny that you are worried. Well, take care, dear. Kisses. Bye. The mother-in-law hung up unexpectedly, and Sharon looked at her phone doubtfully. Denny had clearly inherited his restless, active and curious nature from his mother, and now, without asking almost any questions, Sharon knew where Denny was spending his vacation evenings, and she would see for herself whom he intended to spend his nights with. A day later she stepped off the plane in the familiar seaside town. It was easy for her to find the address of the restaurant that Mrs. Barber had mentioned. What should I do now? The woman wondered. I'll go there, see Denny with some D, T, or another letter of the alphabet, and then what? What will that change? She asked and immediately answered herself. At least I'll look him straight in his smug face, maybe even spit, and then I'll leave. Just like that. Sharon looked determinedly at her watch and walked towards the bus stop. A small, nimble bus took her almost to the very promenade. As soon as she stepped out of the stuffy cabin, she immediately smelled the sea, and her eyes delightedly caught the turquoise sparkle of the sea surface. Of course, the Evening Breeze. What else would you call a restaurant here? She thought involuntarily. A large fenced-off platform led almost to the shoreline, resembling a small pier. It was clear that minor works and finishing touches were being done everywhere, completing a major renovation. But on the terrace, light tables, chairs and armchairs, as well as pots with tropical plants, were already arranged in a mix. The edges of a huge white canopy and white tablecloths, as well as wide palm leaves, were gently rustled by a barely perceptible breeze. "Would you like to have dinner?" a soft, gentle voice asked. "But aren't you open yet?" Sharon asked in surprise. "Yes, we're already starting working." The guy nodded. "I'm a waiter. You see, our official opening is indeed in a few days, but we are already serving our guests and learning their preferences, trying to consider and correct any shortcomings. So, would you like something to eat?" Suddenly, Sharon felt incredibly hungry. Her stomach rumbled, and she looked at the guy in fright. Had he heard? Probably yes, because he smiled slightly and made an inviting gesture towards the terrace. Sharon quickly ran her fingers through her hair, awkwardly tugged at her wrinkled dress, and stepped forward. The table was secluded slightly to the side in a small alcove, and even behind some displayed plants. Denny was nowhere to be seen. In fact, after a few minutes she forgot why she was there. A plate of baked fish and vegetables was placed in front of her. It was so delicious that the process of eating the tender, juicy white meat completely absorbed all of Sharon's senses and mind. "My dear young lady, the fish knife is a little to the left, this wider one, and what you're holding is for butter. It's blunt and won't help you at all," a familiar voice said above her. Sharon started and dropped the wrong knife from her hand. Denny, incredibly handsome, in a light suit that looked especially good with his tanned skin, with casually tousled hair. A smile was looking at her. "And I'm here because," she managed to say, realizing that she had never felt like such a fool in her life as she did at that moment. "You were supposed to be here today," Denny suddenly said. "Why?" she asked in surprise. "Sharon, don't you recognise this place?" Denny suddenly asked. "What place? This one?" She looked around. "This restaurant, it was just built. How can I recognise it?" she asked in surprise. "What does the restaurant have to do with it?" Denny waved his hand. "I mean, the place. Come on, look around." She looked around carefully. "Well, what can you recognise? The shore is the same everywhere. Sand and water." "Oh, Sharon, you are surprisingly unromantic," Denny laughed. "OK, I won't torture you. You wouldn't figure it out until morning. Look, this is the very place where we first met. You were floundering, pretending to be a sea nymph, and I, like a young sea god, was saving you from the abyss. And over there, see?" He pointed to a group of white buildings that looked like small toys from here. "That's where I carried you." "Wait, and your mum," Sharon remembered. "She told me the name of the restaurant. Is she in on this? Is she playing along with you?" "Well, Mum just helped me a little," Denny nodded. "How else would I get you here? And it's such a special day." "What day?" Sharon asked warily, feverishly searching her memory. Denny rolled his eyes. "Sharon, you are incorrigible," he sighed. "Today is exactly 10 years since the day we met, right here." Like a magician, he pulled out a bouquet of flowers from somewhere under the table, thankfully large enough for Sharon to hide her blushing face behind. "Denny, who are D and T in your to-do list for the week?" she finally managed to ask. He looked at his wife and burst out laughing. After laughing for a good couple of minutes, he wiped away the tears that had welled up and said, "Why did you think that D and T were someone? Sharon, D is vitamin D, and T is tracksuit. You know, I always forget to take my pills or gym outfit, so I noted it down just in case." "Denny, I'm such a fool. Will you forgive me?" murmured the completely devastated Sharon. "Of course I will forgive you. Where can I go? Let's forget everything. Although I must admit I didn't know you were so jealous. I'm even a bit flattered. Listen, Sharon, the local chef, by the way, is absolutely wonderful. He specially prepared a dessert for us." Denny looked back and waved to the waiter, who nodded and immediately disappeared, but returned a couple of minutes later with a dish in his hands and, smiling solemnly, placed it on the table. "Here, happy anniversary." On the dish, judging by the appearance, lay a strawberry chocolate dessert. The chef had indeed worked hard, depicting their initials standing in a thin chocolate basket among strawberries in cream. The dessert was a small masterpiece of confectionery art, and any normal person would have frozen in admiration and then begun to worry, "How can I destroy and eat such beauty?" But apparently Sharon was not quite a normal person, because at the sight of the dessert she suddenly felt a sharp and completely unexpected attack of nausea. This was especially unexpected, given that Sharon had always been known for her omnivorous nature, strong stomach and excellent appetite. She, turning pale, jumped up, pressing her hand to her mouth, and rushed away. Denny, completely bewildered, waited for a few seconds and then rushed after her. He certainly did not imagine the reaction of his beloved woman to the specially prepared dish and the end of the romantic evening in this way. Staggering, she came out of the ladies' room, Denny was pacing nearby. "Sharon!" He ran up to her and took her hand, looking into her eyes. "What's wrong, dear? Did you get food poisoning? Oh, God! Let's go to the hospital right now, to the very one where I dragged you with a piece of glass in your foot. Can you walk, or should I carry you?" No matter how bad she felt, she couldn't help but laugh. "Denny, 10 years have passed. You won't be able to carry me now." Half an hour later, they were at the hospital, where fortunately a doctor well known to Denny was on duty. Sharon came out of the procedure room and quietly sat down next to Denny, who had rushed towards her. "Well, did you get food poisoning?" he asked worriedly. "I'll tear this place apart brick by brick. I don't know what I—" "Wait! Don't shout." Sharon reassuringly stroked her husband's hand. "They are not to blame. My condition is only your fault, Denny." "Dear, I'm pregnant." Denny shuddered and looked at her. If there was still any silly, unwanted suspicions left in her foolish, restless, and distrustful mind, they completely and without a trace dissolved in the radiance that lit up in his eyes. Standing before the window of a flower shop, Margot admired the fragrant array of blooms. She adored flowers, and her husband Walter, knowing this, often surprised her with bouquets, both for special occasions and just because. Today, however, she was not choosing flowers for herself. Margot looked around for a salesperson. Nearby, a young woman in a neat apron and gardening gloves was finishing up with a customer who had selected several deep burgundy roses with long stems for a bouquet. "One moment, please. I'll be right with you," the saleswoman said kindly, noticing Margot's gaze. The customer paid, took his bouquet, and headed towards the exit, while the young woman approached Margot with a friendly smile. "What kind of flowers are you looking for today? We just received a new shipment. The roses are all fresh, and our garden lilies are simply exquisite. Just look at them." The saleswoman pulled out a beautiful branch of lilies from a vase. "The white ones are stunning, but the pink ones are truly a marvel." "And the scent," Margot agreed. "I love flowers myself, but today I need to choose a bouquet for a man. You see, it's my husband's birthday. He's turning 40, and I suddenly realised I have no idea what kind of flowers to give a man, or if I should give them at all. Roses are perfect for both men and women, but for men you should avoid small buds, pink hues and any ribbons or bright shiny wrappings. Dark red roses are a classic and timeless choice." "Yes, that would be lovely," Margot replied. 10 minutes later she took the bouquet and hurried out of the flower shop, her heart filled with joy and anticipation. Stopping by the wine boutique on her way home, Margot selected a bottle of her husband's favourite cognac as a gift. She asked for it to be packaged along with the bouquet in a gift basket. Getting into her car, she took a positive pregnancy test in a nice box out of her purse and put it inside the basket. That was her main gift to her husband. Only then she headed home. The preparations for the celebration were in full swing. Music played, hired waiters set the tables in the garden, and appetizing aromas of festive dishes wafted from the kitchen. Several cars were parked along the fence, and early guests had already begun to gather for the host's birthday. Walter was nowhere to be seen in the yard, so she headed into the house. Just as she reached the door, she bumped into him. "Walter, I've been looking for you," she said excitedly. "I need to tell you something important right away." "Margot, I've been looking for you too," Walter replied with a gentle reproach. "You disappeared without a word, just said it was a surprise and left me here to handle everything. I'm the birthday boy, after all, and I have to run around and take care of everything. Besides, I have some news for you too." Walter wanted to continue, but his phone rang in his pocket. He apologised, took out the vibrating device, glanced at the screen, and said, "Margot, darling, let's speak a little later. It's an important call. I have to take it." The celebration was in full swing when Margot noticed that Walter, who had been the centre of attention, had suddenly vanished. She scanned the crowd but couldn't find him. Assuming he had stepped away for a break, she decided to look for him in the house. Walter often retreated to his study when he needed some quiet time, so Margot headed there without hesitation. The door to his study was slightly ajar, and she could hear voices inside. She paused, hearing an unfamiliar female voice say, "Look, this is my little one. Doesn't he look just like you?" "He really does," Walter replied with a smile. "When I was little, I looked just like him, judging by my childhood photos. But why didn't you tell me about him right away?" "Walter, I felt awkward coming to you, and with a child too," the woman said. "I was afraid you'd think I was trying to burden you with him, especially since you've already helped me so much." "Nonsense, Kerry," Walter replied. "I love children and have always dreamed of having a family. But Margot has issues, so it's not that simple." "Walter, if you ever want to confirm kinship, I'm ready to provide a DNA sample right away," the woman said seriously. "No, that's not necessary," Walter said casually. "I can see the resemblance in his round blue eyes and little button nose. I don't need a test to see a family bond." Margot stood frozen in shock, her heart racing as she processed the revelation. "Look, your little one has my nose and my eyes," Walter said, and the woman replied, "I'm so glad you turned out to be an honest and decent person, Walter. I'm so grateful to you. If you only knew." "It's nothing, really. I'm glad you came into my life. Come on, let's go meet the guests. I'll introduce you to everyone." "Maybe we shouldn't," the woman hesitated. "They're all so fancy and dressed up. What will they think when they see me? And what will your wife say when she finds out about me?" "Kerry, stop it," Walter said firmly. "You're not some stranger, and your son is related to me too. Let's go." "Good heavens, what am I hearing?" Margot finally came to her senses, quickly stepping away from the study door. "Does my husband have another woman? And not just any woman, but one who has given birth to his child? And this is when I found out about my pregnancy." Stepping out of the house, Margot paused, indecisive. She understood that the simplest thing to do now would be to approach her husband and demand an explanation, but she suddenly felt humiliated and deeply ashamed that she, the lawful wife, had not been able to give Walter a child, while some other woman had. She then felt a surge of jealousy towards this stranger named Kerry, with whom her husband had been speaking so tenderly in his study. "What should I do now?" she agonized. "I should have gone straight to him and demanded an explanation, instead of standing like a beggar at the door, listening to my husband, who promised to love only me, being so affectionate with this unknown woman. And where did this Kerry come from? I didn't notice her arrival. She must have snuck into the house secretly, taking advantage of the general commotion and festive atmosphere. No, I've had enough. I don't want to deal with any of this, and I can't stay here any longer." She pushed through the crowd of merry, tipsy guests and went to her car. Getting inside, Margot was surprised to find the bouquet of roses, her husband's favourite cognac, and positive test still on the back seat, along with the gift basket. In her haste to share the good news with Walter, she had forgotten to congratulate him on his birthday. "Fine, he has plenty to keep him busy without my congratulations," she thought bitterly, and started the engine and drove away from the house. Let him worry and think whatever he wants. Since childhood, Margot had dreamed of having a car. She loved speed, the thrill of driving and the rush of wind against the windshield. When she married Walter a year ago, he soon gave her a brand new sports car, practically the car of her dreams. Periodically, without needing a special reason, Margot would take the car out for a spin on the high-speed roads, which often worried her husband, who saw cars merely as a means of transportation. Driving onto the highway and picking up speed, Margot suddenly realised that she had forgotten to change out of her fancy evening shoes into more comfortable driving shoes. "Never mind, it's evening, the road is quiet. I'll drive for a bit, calm down, and then go back and demand an explanation from my husband," she thought, accelerating again. The powerful sports car flew down the highway like a bird, the smooth ribbon of asphalt unfurling beneath the wheels. The speedometer nearly approached its maximum, but the speed did not frighten her. Instead, it strangely calmed her. Relaxing, Margot suddenly felt that she had clearly overreacted, failed to understand the situation, and rushed out of the house like a foolish, impulsive girl. "That's it, Michael. I can't walk any more, I'm tired," said the young homeless woman, throwing her worn-out bag full of junk found in city dumps onto the highway. "Let's stop and sit for a bit, maybe under that tree," she said, pointing a dirty finger with a broken nail at a field aside the road. "What are you talking about, sister?" retorted her companion, who looked just as dishevelled. Dressed in a worn denim suit and sporting a scraggly beard, he looked like a man of indeterminate age, but an obvious lifestyle. "Look, the sun is already setting. Before you know it, it'll be dark. Or are you planning to spend the night in the middle of a field?" He sneered, but picked up the bag she had thrown down. "I'm tired and hungry," the homeless woman declared, refusing to move. "Anita, sister, do you think I'm not hungry too?" Michael retorted. "We did eat a bit before heading back, remember? We found a whole bag of stale pies in the dumpster by the cafe. You ate more than I did." "That was ages ago," Anita whined. "Those pies were difficult to chew and not very filling. You promised to take care of me, remember? So take care of me now. I'm tired and hungry. All the time. Got it?" "You're a bottomless pit. You're tiny, but you eat like a horse. I know what you're up to," Michael replied, exasperated. Earlier that day, the siblings had lucked out while scavenging through city dumpsters. They found 5 cans of beef stew, likely discarded by someone. Anita immediately wanted to open one of the cans and eat it, but the more practical Michael insisted they wait. "What's the point of eating it now?" he reasoned. "You'll just gobble it down and be hungry again in no time. Let's wait until we get back to our place. We can heat it up and make a proper meal out of it." "I'm hungry now, and you're such a miser, Michael," Anita shouted, plopping down on the asphalt. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll sit here all night if I'd like to." "You can't tell me what to do. I'm 18. I can do what I want. I can smoke, drink, and hang out with guys if I'd like to." "Get up. Cars drive on this road," Michael said, looking around at the deserted highway. He picked up his sister and dragged her off the road. "Scared, huh?" Anita taunted, struggling to free herself. "Give me a can, or I'll throw myself in front of a car, I swear." "You're insane, you know that?" Michael snapped, pulling a can of stew from his backpack. "Here, and don't you dare say you're hungry again any time soon, understand?" He led her to a nearby tree off the road. Anita, finally getting her way, followed him without a fuss. Sitting down under the tree, Michael pulled out a dirty knife and a bent aluminium spoon from his pocket. He opened the can and handed it to his sister, who devoured the contents in seconds. "Happy now?" Michael asked, as Anita licked the empty can clean. "There's more where that came from," she hinted, eyeing his backpack. "You're unbelievable," Michael said, shaking his head. "You just ate a whole can of stew, and you're still hungry. You're like a black hole. Come on, let's go home." He stood up and kicked the empty can away, grabbing his sister's arm to lead her back. "Let go of me!" Anita yelled, breaking free and running towards the highway. "Give me another can, or I'll throw myself in front of a car." Suddenly, the sound of a distant engine grew louder, and a sleek sports car appeared on the horizon, speeding towards them. "Stop, you idiot!" Michael shouted, noticing his sister's small, awkward figure darting across the highway in front of the speeding car. "Stop, you'll get hit!" he yelled, chasing after her. In the small evening clutch lying on the passenger seat, Margot's phone rang. Keeping one hand on the wheel and her eyes on the road, she reached for the bag with her other hand, fumbling for the phone. "Ah, there you are," she muttered, seeing that Walter was trying to call her. "I won't answer," she decided, though her earlier enthusiasm had waned. However, Walter, sensing something was wrong, persisted in calling her repeatedly, and Margot finally answered. "All right, I'll be home soon, and we'll talk then." She began to slow down, intending to turn around and head back home. As she reached to put the phone back in her bag, Margot glanced away from the road for just a moment. When she looked back, she gasped in horror and slammed on the brakes. In the headlights, she saw a small figure darting across the highway, followed by another. Margot, caught off guard, tried to brake hard, but her heel caught on the carpet, preventing her from stopping quickly. She swerved towards the shoulder, drove across the field, and finally came to a halt as the car's front end collided with a tree. "You idiot! You stupid fool!" Michael yelled, catching up to his sister and grabbing her by the collar. "Look what you've done! You've caused an accident, and someone might be hurt or even killed because of you!" He raged, shaking her. All right, let go," Anita pleaded, suddenly meek. "You'll tear my jacket and it's already worn out." "You won't get me a new one," she added, trying to pry his strong fingers off her. "You're worried about your jacket?" Michael snapped, though he released her. "What about the accident you caused? What are we supposed to do now? Call the police?" he demanded. "Michael, please don't call the police. I didn't mean to," Anita begged, frantically adjusting her tattered clothes. The man turned and headed towards the car, which had come to a stop in the field near a tree. Anita, at a loss, silently followed him. Approaching the car, Michael leaned down and peered inside. It was not yet completely dark, so he could easily see a young woman slumped over the steering wheel, held in place by her seatbelt. She showed no signs of life, but there was no blood in the car either. Michael opened the door and checked her pulse. "What's going on?" Anita asked, peering over his shoulder into the car. "Is she dead?" she asked indifferently, eyeing the woman's shiny evening bag on the passenger seat. "Keep your hands off!" Michael slapped her hand away. "The last thing we need is the police accusing us of theft on top of the accident. She's alive, just unconscious. Looks like she hit her head," he said, checking the woman's pulse. "Hey, lady, wake up," he called out, gently slapping her cheeks. When she didn't respond, he rummaged in his backpack and pulled out a plastic water bottle. "I'll splash some water on her face to revive her," he said, pouring a little water into her mouth. "She's coming to," Anita noticed, seeing the young woman stir. "Let's get out of here before she sees us," she urged, suddenly forgetting about the shiny evening bag she had been eyeing. "We can't just leave her," Michael protested. "It's almost night, and there won't be any traffic on the highway until morning. She might not be found until dawn." "So what? It's not our problem," Anita retorted, annoyed by her brother's unexpected concern for a stranger. "We can't leave her overnight, that's for sure, but we can't call the police either. Not with you causing the accident." He glared at his sister. "So we'll have to take her with us. Maybe she'll come to her senses and can take care of herself." He pulled the young woman out of the car and laid her on the grass. "Hey, lady, wake up! Come on! Open your eyes!" he said, gently patting her cheeks. Noticing the young woman finally opening her eyes, he said with relief, "Thank goodness you're awake. Come on, miss, get up. You can't lie on the grass, it's damp and cold. And it's getting dark." He helped the dazed young woman to her feet. "Where am I? What happened?" Margot murmured, looking around confused. "You were in an accident," Michael explained. "We found you, and we'll take care of you until you feel better. Lean on me. Let's get you somewhere safe." "I don't know who I am," the young woman stammered. "I don't remember anything." "Well, isn't this convenient?" Anita muttered, quickly snatching the shiny evening bag from the car and stuffing it into her pocket while her brother was distracted. "Some high-class lady you are can't even remember your own name." "Give her a break," Michael said. "She might have hit her head and lost her memory." When the car was far behind, Anita carefully looked at her brother's back and, convinced that he was not paying attention to her, fell behind and pulled out the coveted find from her pocket. "Look at this!" she exclaimed with delight, examining the expensive item. "It's all sparkling like a diamond. I've never seen anything like it, not even when Mum and Dad were alive, and we lived in a normal apartment like everyone else," she said joyfully. Michael and Anita had not become homeless by choice 2 years ago. The siblings were born into an ordinary family. Their father, before succumbing to alcoholism, worked at a local factory, while their mother, lacking education, worked as a janitor for the local management company. They lived simply and modestly, like everyone else in the neighbourhood on the outskirts of the city. They had never seen extra money, and everything would have been fine if, one day, their father had not met an old friend. As often happens in such cases, the long-lost friends immediately went to celebrate their reunion, visiting all the local bars and eventually ending up at the home of some acquaintance of the friend. What caused their father, who only drank on holidays, to change so drastically is unknown, but it was after that fateful meeting with his old friend that he began to spiral out of control and soon became a real, perpetually hungover alcoholic. The father was fired from the factory for his constant drunkenness and frequent absences, after which the family's life became even harder, surviving only on their mother's meagre janitorial salary. However, the family's troubles did not end there. The completely alcoholic father was soon found dead on the street. One day, suspicious-looking individuals unexpectedly appeared at the doorstep of their family's apartment, claiming that the owner had taken out a loan using the apartment as collateral. Due to the borrower's death, they demanded either the repayment of the loan or the immediate vacating of the collateral property. Their mother first told the intruders to go to hell, and then threatened to scald them with boiling water from a whistling kettle if they did not leave the apartment immediately. The intruders, not expecting such resistance from an ordinary woman, thought it best to retreat behind the door, but threatened to return soon, and they did. The next day, neighbours found the mother lying beneath the window of her apartment, severely injured. The barely alive woman was rushed to the hospital, but she passed away a week later. Before her death, their mother, realizing that her days were numbered, asked for her children to be brought to her. In the presence of her daughter, she made her son, as the elder, swear to take care of his sister until she was securely settled in life. The police did not investigate the case thoroughly, concluding that the woman had accidentally fallen out of the window while trying to clean it, a tragic accident that could happen to anyone. After the mother's death, those same intruders reappeared at Anita's and Michael's apartment, this time demanding repayment of the debt from the children, their heirs of the suspiciously deceased parents. Anita was in her final years of school when Michael graduated from school last year and had been moonlighting as a delivery boy. There was no way they could repay the debt. The leader of the intruders then advised them not to resist, but to vacate the apartment, which now belonged to their credit organisation, since they had no more. "Get out of here while you can, if you value your lives," he menacingly whispered to Michael. "At least you'll stay alive, and we'll take the apartment, one way or another. Don't doubt it." To emphasise his seriousness, he punched Michael in the stomach. Frightened for himself and his sister, Michael quickly gathered some belongings and documents in front of the intruders and they fled the city as fast as they could. The thought of going to the police never crossed their minds. "Where will we go now?" Anita wailed as they hurriedly left their home. "Where will we live? There are only fields and woods around." "I don't know," Michael replied grimly. "We just need to get as far away from these thugs as possible if we want to stay alive. We'll find some village to stay in temporarily. Many of them have empty houses," he suggested, trying to reassure his sister. However, things turned out slightly differently. Soon they encountered several travellers who appeared to be homeless. Michael decided to ask them about places where they could stay for free and safely hide out for an indefinite period. "We live in an abandoned children's camp in the woods. There are a few buildings there in pretty good condition. We are comfortable there, it's not far from here," one of the homeless men replied. "The police never come here, and the locals are afraid of us, so they stay away. And what about you? Why are you running away from someone?" he asked. "If only it were that simple," Michael sighed. "Our parents were killed over a debt, our apartment was taken away, and we barely escaped with our lives. Now we're looking for a place to go. Could we stay with you temporarily until we find somewhere else?" he asked hopefully. "Why not?" the first homeless man replied. "You're welcome to stay." Living in an abandoned, ruined camp in the forest turned out to be not as bad as they had initially imagined. The homeless cleared the underbrush, making a nice clearing around a building, and some even tilled the fertile forest soil and planted tomatoes and cucumbers around the edges of the clearing. They fetched water from a small river 1/2 kilometre from the forest, searched for mushrooms and berries in the summer, and went to the city for work. In short, life was tough but manageable. Soon the brother and sister settled in and stayed there for 2 whole years. This was certainly better than lying in the ground with their parents. Anita, however, free from the constraints of school and parents, she became quite unruly. Taking advantage of the fact that her brother was bound by their mother's promise, she soon turned into a capricious and willful individual, constantly nagging Michael with her whimsical character. After admiring the stolen handbag, Anita decided to explore its contents to see if there was anything valuable inside. Pulling the zipper, adorned with a brand logo and a large rhinestone, she opened the clasp and curiously peeked inside. Wow, what a lipstick! And the compact with a mirror! Classy! The homeless girl murmured in admiration, pulling out items common to any woman's handbag. Wow, there's even a phone here! Finally! Now I have my own phone, and I won't give it to Michael, she thought vengefully, glancing at her brother's distant figure. After examining the contact list of the stolen phone, and unexpectedly coming across a contact labelled "Walter, beloved husband," Anita puffed up enviously and grumbled discontentedly under her breath. Of course, some people have loving husbands who give them expensive phones, lipsticks, compacts adorned with rhinestones, while others have to live in a ruined building and eat from the trash. Where's the justice in this world, huh? Suddenly, she had an idea. How much this Walter is willing to pay for his beloved wife. Clearly the man is not poor if he gives expensive gifts and cars, Anita concluded, and stuffing the phone into her pocket, returned the contents of the handbag, zipped it up, and put it in her other pocket. "Well, life seems to be looking up," she said joyfully, and ran to catch up with her brother, who was already far ahead. Upon returning to the homeless camp with her brother, Anita did not immediately go to her own room. Taking advantage of the fact that Michael's attention was occupied by their unexpected guest, she slipped over to one of their neighbours. Descending the rotten steps, she quietly knocked on the shabby door. "Hey, Tony, are you there?" she asked. "If you are, answer, I need to talk to you." "Anita, is that you?" A hoarse, smoky voice replied from behind the door, and a shaggy head and puffy face appeared in the slightly open doorway. "You'd better get out of here. Your brother forbade me to be friends with you. Look at this bruise under my eye. And besides, I'm busy right now." He lied without hesitation. Anita knew very well that Michael was categorically against her friendship with Tony because of his constant drunkenness and striking untidiness. Anita, of course, remembered her brother's opinion about the neighbour, but she had no intention of listening to him on this matter. "Come on, Tony, relax," she replied carelessly. "Michael is busy with something else. He has a guest." "What kind of guest?" the neighbour grumbled without any enthusiasm. "A guest, a woman who is married to a rich man and has money herself," Anita replied. Well, that's something," Tony smirked. "What would such a chick be doing here? Usually they live in country houses and foreign villas." "I'm not making this up. If you don't believe me, go see for yourself," Anita huffed indignantly. "This woman just got into a car accident and Michael brought her to us for the night because she needs help. And no one drives on the highway at night." "And how do you know she has money and is married to a rich man?" Tony doubted. "Even if she does, what do we care about her money?" "Look at this phone she has," Anita replied, showing her find to the neighbour. "And there's a number saved as Walter, beloved husband. So I thought, what if this Walter doesn't know where his wife is and is looking for her, and we call him and quietly demand money for the woman who is sitting in our dwelling with Michael. In the worst case, we set a price for the information on where to find her." "Want to make some money, Tony?" Anita asked slyly. "All right, come in," Tony finally decided, opening the door for Anita. "But remember, you'll be the one calling this Walter," she said, slipping inside. "That's why I'm bringing you in on this. He might not believe me." Walter dialed his wife's number once more, again got no answer, and said perplexedly to Carrie, standing next to him, "She's not answering. What's going on?" "What's the point of just calling? Maybe something happened to your wife," the woman replied. "You were told that she was seen getting into a car and driving off about 30 minutes ago. Maybe it makes sense to go and look for Margot yourself," she suggested. "Yes, you're right," he said anxiously. "Our guests will be partying until morning anyway, so I'll go look for her now," he decided, heading to his car parked by the entrance. "All right, then I'll call a taxi and go back to the hotel," Carrie replied. "What's the point of me staying here? I've already done the main thing. Finally met you." "Oh, no," Walter disagreed. "Since you've turned up, you should stay with us for at least a few days. I've already arranged a room to be prepared, so I won't let you go anywhere." "Then I'll come with you," Carrie said. "You never know. You might need help. And besides, I don't want to stay here without you," she admitted reluctantly. "All right, get in. Let's go together," Walter replied, opening the car door for Carrie. Remembering Margot's love for speeding down the highway, Walter thought it made sense to search for her along the nearby highway. Driving out of the elite neighbourhood where their house was located, he stopped at the highway, wondering which direction to start the search. He needed to hurry. The twilight was deepening and visibility on the road was getting worse. After thinking for a few more seconds, Walter turned left and, accelerating, decided to check this section of the highway first. Fortunately, Walter's hunch was correct. Choosing the left side of the road, they found Margot's car about 10 kilometres from the starting point of the search. "It looks like it's been in an accident," Carrie said with anxiety. "And that's definitely Margot's car," Walter replied, slowing down. Together with Carrie, they rushed out of the car and ran to the accident scene. "Margot's not in the car, even though the doors are wide open. There is no phone or her purse either," Walter said worriedly, reaching the car first. "What are your relations with your wife like? Could it be that you had a fight and she just ran away from you?" Carrie suggested. Our relationship is great, and we haven't had a single serious argument in the year we've been together," Walter replied thoughtfully. "In fact, Margot was going to tell me some happy news today, but didn't get the chance because the guests started arriving," he noted, opening the trunk of the car. "See, there's a gift basket with a bouquet and my favourite cognac. So Margot was going to congratulate me on my birthday. She wanted to do something nice for me since she went to buy flowers and cognac herself. I just don't understand why she didn't congratulate me in the end. And, moreover, why would she want to run away on my own birthday?" Walter said, shrugging in bewilderment. "Walter, I think I know what's going on," Carrie suddenly said. "Don't you think the reason could be me? Maybe Margot saw me by chance, thought something wrong about it, and left the house on an emotional impulse. After all, you didn't tell her a word about me," the woman suggested. "It may have sense, but where do we look for her now? And most importantly, what happened to her?" Walter asked anxiously, looking around. "Margot, answer me, please, if you're here!" he called out loudly. "Walter, wait, don't get upset," Carrie said, looking into the open car interior. "Shine your phone's flashlight here. I'm a medic, an operating room nurse, and I worked in a trauma centre for several years. I can tell you right away that the accident probably wasn't serious. See, there's no blood in the car, and the bumper isn't badly damaged, so Margot shouldn't have been seriously injured," she reassured him. "Yes, thank goodness for that, but where is she?" Walter continued to worry. "Margot, where are you?" he called out again into the gathering darkness, but received no response. Suddenly the surrounding silence was broken by the sound of an incoming call. Walter irritably pulled his phone out of his pocket, intending to decline the call, but when he saw who was calling, he muttered in surprise, "It can't be. It's Margot. I didn't even dare hope. Margot, sunshine, where are you?" he asked with relief, answering the call. "I've been looking for you. My feet are killing me. How could you do this?" He gently reproached his wife. "This isn't Margot," a raspy male voice chuckled in response. "And if you want your wife back, alive and well, then listen to our conditions." The strange caller rasped, barely able to speak clearly. "Is this some kind of joke?" Walter asked, even more surprised. "Who am I speaking with? Put my wife on the phone right now, do you hear me?" he demanded resolutely. "Hey, man, are you deaf or something?" the caller rasped back. "I'm telling you in plain language. We have your wife, so listen to our conditions," he stubbornly repeated. "I'm not listening to anything," Walter retorted. "At least not until I hear my wife's voice on the phone. Come on, call her over now." Refusing to believe that anything bad had happened to Margot, he pressed the raspy caller. There was a pause on the phone. Some rustling and muffled murmuring could be heard. "Hey, where did you go? Hello?" Walter said angrily into the phone. "Answer me right now. What the hell is going on?" He began to lose patience. "This guy wants to talk to his wife," Tony said, covering the phone speaker with his hand as he listened to Anita's conversation. "What do we do now?" "Damn it, I didn't think of that," Anita said, puzzled. "All right, tell him you'll call back. And you stay here quietly. I'll figure this out." "Hey, don't rush, I'll call back soon," Tony said to Walter, hung up and handed the phone back to Anita with a shaky hand. She put it in her jacket pocket, said nothing, and left his room, heading straight to her own. Michael was there, sitting on a crude wooden stool in the corner, peeling potatoes. The injured woman sat nearby on a bench, silently gazing at the shabby walls of the dwelling in bewilderment. Anita paused thoughtfully at the doorway. For her plan to work, Michael was clearly in the way. "Where have you been wandering? Tell me," her brother asked unkindly, noticing Anita lingering in the doorway. "Were you visiting that drunk again? Confess right now," he demanded. It's all his fault, Anita whined in response. I was just walking by and he jumped out at me. Good evening, Anita, he says. Where have you been? We used to be such good neighbours. And then he slapped me below my spine. She dramatically acted out the made-up scene. What? So the black eye I gave him wasn't enough? But don't worry, he'll get more now. Michael fumed, dropping the potatoes and jumping up from the stool. You stay here, keep an eye on our guest, and finish peeling the potatoes for dinner. I'll be back in 5 minutes, he said to his sister, and looking stern, left the room. Hey, you, take this phone, Anita said hurriedly to the woman as soon as her brother was gone. I'm going to call a guy, and you'll say something like, Hi, dear, she explained, placing the phone in the girl's hand and dialing Walter's number. However, the phone started ringing itself. Walter, who was waiting for the stranger to call back, lost his last bit of patience and started dialing his wife's phone. And what is this? Michael asked sternly, suddenly appearing in the doorway of the dugout. You little brat! He grabbed Anita by the collar of her jacket. And I didn't believe that drunk Tony when he said you were planning to ask money from the woman's husband. I thought he was lying, but it turns out he was telling the truth. The brother shook his sister like a naughty kitten by the scruff of her neck. Give back everything you took from the car right now, he demanded angrily. Meanwhile, the injured guest looked in surprise at the phone ringing in her hand and unexpectedly answered the call, putting the phone to her ear. Hello? Hello, hey! Answer me right now! Where is my wife? Walter shouted into the phone. Walter, it's me, Margot said joyfully. Don't worry, I'm fine, I'll be home soon, she added excitedly. Great, I knew she'd come to her senses, Michael exclaimed, letting go of his sister. She must have heard her husband. Then he turned back to Anita and sternly said, Quickly, give me back everything you stole from the car, or do I need to explain something again? No, I understand, Michael, Anita hastily replied, afraid of her brother's disciplinary measures. Here, take it. You don't have to ask twice, she muttered, pulling out Margot's sparkling evening bag from her pocket. With a clear look of regret, the homeless girl gave the bag back to its owner. You keep it, if you like it so much, Margot suddenly said in response. I should thank you somehow for your help, Michael, she said, looking at the embarrassed Michael. Well, it's nothing. The man modestly lowered his eyes. But what about the contents of the purse? Should I return them, or can I keep them? Anita asked, not letting the conversation drift. Take it all, Margot waved her hand. Can you take me to where my car is? Of course, I'll take you there right now, let's go. Michael replied with a smile, and turning to his sister, he added sternly, And you are grounded. While I'm gone, stay here. Peel the potatoes and then start cooking them. Understand? And by the way, even though you don't deserve it, you've been given such a valuable gift. Where's your thank you? Thank you, Anita waved him off, pleased as she admired herself in the compact mirror. Don't be mad at her, Michael said to Margot. There's no one to discipline her, and as the older brother, I promised my mother before she died that I would look after my sister. I apologize, he explained. And please don't report Anita to the police. If she gets arrested, she'll be ruined. Of course I won't. What police? Margot replied and asked, So, your mother died? Not just died. She was killed, just like our father, Michael sighed in response. They died because of the apartment that our father allegedly used as collateral. And they almost got rid of us too. That's why we ran away 2 years ago. Wherever our eyes lead us. And that's how we became homeless, he exclaimed grimly. Yes, that's sad, I'm sorry, Margot replied. But 2 years have passed. Maybe everything has settled down. And maybe you can return to your old life now, she thoughtfully noted. Maybe. Michael smiled in response. I need to think about it. Well, shall we go? Your husband must be waiting for you, and it's already dark, he reminded her. Margot, finally! Walter exclaimed, seeing his wife walking towards him across the field. And who is this with you? He asked warily, noticing Michael. Shining his phone's flashlight on him, he asked, Is this the guy who demanded money? No, he is a good man. Margot smiled in response and explained. This is Michael. He took me in right after the accident, so that I wouldn't have to spend the night in the wrecked car. You're something, Walter said, but I can't understand where you are heading at night. Margot was about to reply, but didn't get the chance. Good evening, a woman's voice suddenly sounded behind her. Margot turned around, and the smile instantly vanished from her face. Judging by the voice standing before her was the very same Kerry, because of whom she had left home in a fit of emotion. Good evening to you too, Margot replied coldly. My name is Kerry. I was sitting in Walter's car while we were waiting for you, she explained. But when you appeared, I decided I should come over and introduce myself. In Walter's car, I see, Margot acknowledged Kerry with a disdainful look. Yes, it's really time to meet, Walter decisively intervened. Margot, meet Kerry, my half-sister, from my father's side. What? A half-sister? Margot asked in surprise. I've never heard that you have a sister. I thought I didn't have, but recently, Walter replied happily, she contacted me herself and asked for help. She's a single mother with a small child and got entangled with a ruthless con artist who saddled her with a huge debt and disappeared. But that's a long story. I'll tell you all about it. Margot, believe me, I would never have asked him for help if I weren't in a desperate situation, Kerry said fervently. And you did the right thing by asking, Walter replied. I hardly have any relatives left, and now I suddenly have 2 more, he added contentedly. 2? Margot asked. So the child you mentioned. That's my little nephew. And what did you think? Walter laughed. By the way you eavesdropped at the door? That's not nice. He playfully wagged his finger at her. It's not nice to keep secrets from your wife, Margot retorted. Margot, my dear, I wasn't hiding anything, Walter disagreed. I was waiting for Kerry to arrive for my birthday and wanted to tell you about her, and you were also going to share some important news with me, he reminded his wife. Yes, Walter, you're right. And yes, this is your birthday present, my dear husband, Margot remembered, opening the trunk of her damaged car and handing Walter the gift basket with cognac and a bouquet. Thank you, my love, I'm very pleased, Walter replied, although, to be honest, I already discovered your gift a little while ago, he admitted. That's not a problem, Margot said, not at all embarrassed. I have another piece of news that will make you just as happy as this gift basket, she said intriguingly. Well, don't keep me in suspense then, Walter urged his wife. What is it? And you, Walter, were wrong when you said that your circle of relatives had increased by 2 people, Margot replied mysteriously. The thing is, your circle of relatives will soon start to grow even more. I'm pregnant. Walter, I got a call from the reproductive clinic today, and they told me that I can have children naturally, without any IVF, she exclaimed. That was the important news. Wow, that's wonderful! Walter looked at Margot in astonishment and, hugging her, noted, That's why they say you shouldn't celebrate your 40th birthday. In my opinion, that's nonsense. Today is the best birthday I've ever had, he confidently added. By the end of the work shift, Jeff was already out of sorts. Routine work all day long, patterns, details, a picky foreman, colleagues who didn't shine with intelligence. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Study, son, then you can choose a good profession and go to work in a suit and tie." These educational moments were always interrupted by his father's loud comments. "Sarah, why are you talking nonsense? Suit, tie, glossy shoes? You want our son to grow up to be a soft-handed man? Not while I'm alive. He'll follow in my footsteps. Working men are always needed. With a worthwhile trade in his hands, a real man will always earn a piece of meat. And meat for a man is his food and his strength. Remember what your daddy said, son." Now, standing under a hot shower in the locker room, Jeff dreamily imagined how Bonnie would serve him a plate of hearty soup with a big piece of meat at home, followed by a second course, meat again, with plenty of side dishes. His wife was an excellent cook and never disappointed him. He'd lucked out marrying a woman with a real chef's diploma, and the fact that he wouldn't let her work in her profession, well, there was no point wasting her culinary talent when he alone could eat everything. Jeff arrived home in good spirits. The enticing aroma of Bonnie's speciality cutlets wafted through the apartment, lifting his mood further. After washing his hands thoroughly, Jeff decided to play the role of strict father and called 10-year-old Amelie and 7-year-old Billy to the hall to listen to their report on school progress. He examined his eldest daughter's diary, full of A's and B's, asked about the drawing in his son's album, and upon learning it was a horse in a meadow, laughed heartily. "You'll never be Thomas Cole, that's clear enough, but no matter, don't get too excited. You'll work at Daddy's factory. Not everyone becomes an artist. Your mother and I once went to an exhibition. I'll tell you this, a scribble is a scribble. It's not a real occupation, just idle hands at work. Now run along, our mother's calling for dinner." Jeff sat at the kitchen table without asking if the others had eaten. He gazed at Bonnie with satisfaction, deciding that tonight he might favour her, fulfil his sacred male duty. That's how he always referred to intimacy with his wife, believing he was doing her an honour. Unaware of his thoughts, Bonnie went about her usual routine at the cooker. She removed his empty bowl of soup, set before her husband a pan of steaming cutlets, arranged mashed potatoes on a clean plate, and moved a bowl of salad. Surveying the table, the head of the family began calculating something in his mind. "What's all this? We were at the market together on Saturday. Meat's getting more expensive by the day, yet here we have beef soup, cutlets with potatoes, and out-of-season fresh vegetables. Am I supposed to work myself to death at the factory just to feed all my freeloaders with such extravagance? It's late fall, and instead of affordable sauerkraut, you've got fresh farm vegetables and greenery in the fridge. What am I to you, a working ox to plough endlessly, waiting for your next paycheck? Do you do nothing yourself, growing fat only? The children do nothing but study. There's only one breadwinner in this family, so remember that from now on. Starting tomorrow, meat is only for me. The children will make do with porridge, and you'll manage fine with cheap seasonal vegetables. Your cabbage stew is perfectly good. Add a couple of sausages instead of meat, and that'll do nicely. So from now on, no market any more. I will buy everything we need myself." Bonnie stopped in her tracks. The facade of her happy marriage finally collapsed before her eyes. She silently removed her apron, covered the pan of cutlets and the pot of soup with their lids, and left the kitchen. Her patience had snapped instantly, finally, and irrevocably. 12 strange years of marriage. For the sake of the children, she could raise them herself. Why had she even stepped into this family maelstrom? She had been such a pretty girl. All the boys in high school had pursued her, inviting her to movies and offering ice cream at cafes, but she always hurried home to her mother, who was already ill then. Having given birth late in life, raised a child alone, and worked 2 jobs, had taken its toll. After classes in culinary school, Bonnie would rush home with fear, dreading that one day she'd unlock the door to find her mother breathless. In the end, her mother passed quietly in her sleep. Bonnie found her in the morning, wearing a peaceful smile, something that made it even more devastating. The grief was overwhelming, and soon Bonnie had been driven into marriage by profound loneliness. While practicing in the canteen, after her mother's death, she began smiling at a confident, brave guy, older than her, who came for lunch. "Oh, you're an appetizing girl. I could eat you up instead of a bun." Bonnie hadn't recognised such remarks as inappropriate, having no experience with men. His courtship was loud, his conquest swift. After just a couple of walks beneath the romantic moon and stars, he imposed to visit her for a cup of coffee. The next morning, as Bonnie served Jeff breakfast in her apartment, he praised her. "You're special, Bonnie, in every way. I never expected to be your first. Look at me carefully. We might have something here. I wouldn't turn down such a fine woman." Within months, Bonnie was pregnant. Jeff played the gentleman, bringing his girlfriend to the registry office, all proper and formal. They had a modest wedding. They settled in Bonnie's inherited apartment, where Jeff immediately declared himself head of the household. Their family life followed the old patriarchal ways. Bonnie knew little about proper marital relations. She genuinely believed that this was normal married life. The epiphany came later. She would walk in the courtyard, first with Amelie, then with Billy. Other young mothers glowed with happiness, pushing strollers near the playground, checking their watches expectantly. Soon enough their husbands would appear, bearing flowers, cakes, or other signs of affection. Jeff dismissed such gestures as foolish. He would condescendingly buy ice cream for the family in the park, strutting beside them. "Look how generous I am. I'll even buy movie tickets." He truly believed these weekend outings were enough for happiness. "Yearly seaside vacations? Don't joke," he'd say. In his opinion, one coastal trip with his young wife was sufficient. The children could go themselves once they grew up and started earning. It was enough that he fed them, clothed them, bought necessary books and toys. Some might find Jeff's character terrible, but this was precisely who he was. It started when his own father would shut the refrigerator in his mother's face, saying, "Eat what you earn. Jeff can boil himself a wiener, but don't you dare touch my meat stew." Young Jeff initially felt troubled by his father's outbursts, secretly sharing half his wiener or cutlet with his silent poor mum, or offering her bites of his chocolate. Then something shifted within him. Why share with his mother? She wasn't starving. She managed on pasta, porridge, bread and water. It wasn't quite a bad diet. "Women don't need meat at all. They don't physically work like that." The boy used to repeat his father's words in his mind. Bonnie was well acquainted with her colourless, quiet mother-in-law. The elderly woman attributed her gloominess to the hardships of widowhood. She spent her days at home, never going to the mall, movies or park. Her only entertainment was chatting with neighbours on a bench and walking to the pharmacy and grocery store. Bonnie hadn't delved much into such matters initially. She saw her mother-in-law as stiff, silent and uncommunicative, attributing it all to personality. Only later did she realise she herself was inexorably sliding toward the same bleak state. Without change, she would become equally battered. Then one day, to her horror, she recognised she had never truly loved her husband. Jeff's rudeness and greed were unbearable. Thus, she learned to avoid marital duty cleverly by feeding him until he was too full to want anything else from her. She would bring snacks to him while he watched TV in the evenings. Then she would slip into the bedroom once he dozed off. Jeff would snore on the sofa until morning, in front of the dark TV screen. He reminded her of an overfed bull being readied for Christmas. It was nearly repulsive, yet Bonnie didn't know how to break this twisted knot. The woman greeted her husband mechanically after work, immediately seating him at the table and hurrying to feed him his fill, making sure to have dinner with the children before he arrived. Thoughts of divorce grew more frequent. Though scared of managing alone with the children, even her lack of work experience didn't worry her. With her profession, she could feed herself and her children. Bonnie realised how Jeff had made her normal thoughts about food seem abnormal. Loving meant cooking with care for loved ones, choosing the best ingredients with pleasure. What of this division of people into those worthy of meat and the useless lackeys who shouldn't be fed it? Such a fascinating categorization, either a philosophical doctrine or psychological delusion. Clearly, no Nobel Prize awaited this discovery about dividing society into first, second and third classes. Jeff and his father had invented this nonsense out of terrible greed. Bonnie shook her head with determination. She would divorce her useless husband and buy a new life with Amelie and Billy. While the children prepared for bed, Jeff fell asleep as usual after a hearty dinner, his snores filling the living room. Bonnie didn't want to wake him for explanations. Everything could wait until morning. While the house slept peacefully, she packed his things. It was her apartment. She let him move in with his mother. By 6 a.m, 3 heavy suitcases stood in the hallway. Bonnie checked the closet one last time. If she'd forgotten anything, Jeff could collect it later. Her aversion to her husband peaked at that moment. She couldn't bear another minute with him. Jeff woke up smugly, ready to criticise Bonnie for overfeeding him the previous evening, causing him to fall asleep before his marital duty. Then he noticed the suspicious suitcases by the door. "Going somewhere, Bonnie? What's this about?" Bonnie entered the living room, sat in the armchair, and gathered her thoughts to speak clearly. "These are your things, Jeff. Everything I've managed to pack. I'm filing for divorce, today." Jeff was genuinely shocked by his wife's behaviour. She's lost her mind, getting too bold. Must have woken up on the wrong side of the bed, he thought, determined to teach her sense immediately. Not wanting to delay the lesson, Jeff grabbed a kitchen towel from the ironing board. He swung to strike Bonnie's face, intent on putting her in her place before she got too defiant. Bonnie merely smiled faintly. She had crossed the Rubicon and was ready to burn the remaining bridges. Without scenes, fights or scandals. Jeff's blood ran cold when he heard her voice. She had never spoken to him like that before. "I never noticed, Jeff, that you have trouble hearing. Did you misunderstand my words? You will leave this house with your belongings right now. I'll even wrap up some food for you, so you won't go hungry on the way." Jeff suddenly went limp. He clearly realised that Bonnie was not joking. She was kicking him out in earnest. He hadn't expected such a turn from his usually docile wife. He was confused, unsure how to behave or what to do next. Seeing him surrender, Bonnie smirked. "It won't be difficult for me to put your suitcases outside without your help. I'll handle things with the children. And don't let your shadow darken this doorway again. It's over between us, definitively and irrevocably. I won't live another day with a man like you. I'm done." Jeff had no fight left in him. Gone was his desire to command her in his usual gruff voice. Before him stood a stranger, a woman he no longer recognised. Unable to predict what she might do next, he retreated from this battlefield without waiting for a more dramatic finale. He quietly carried the suitcases one by one into the entryway, accepted the lunch bundle from his wife's hands, and absently sniffed it. The package smelled enticingly of Bonnie's signature cutlets. Jeff wanted to pinch himself. Surely this was just his worst nightmare. The illusion shattered with a thunderous slam as Bonnie shut the door behind him. Jeff's mother, sitting on a bench near the entrance of her house, couldn't believe her eyes. Her son Jeff stormed through their yard with his suitcase, red as a tomato and seething with anger, as if scorched by the summer sun. He marched up to his mother and immediately began berating her. Still sitting here with nothing to do? Let's go home. I'm hungry after my shift. The woman, long accustomed to avoiding unnecessary questions, scurried ahead of her son. She quietly opened the apartment door and hurried to the kitchen. Though the refrigerator was nearly empty, she could make pasta. Seeing the finished dish, Jeff's face reddened further. Mother, you have a grown man sitting here. I live on my pension, Jeff. How can I afford delicacies? I've always tried not to burden you, never asked for help. Even after working at the factory my whole life, the state didn't give me much for my old age. But don't worry, I manage. Everyone has such a pension nowadays. Jeff couldn't stand his mother's chatter. An empty pasta, even without cheese, irritated him even more. He hadn't eaten such awful food since kindergarten. Now he had to adjust to this bewildering new life. Let Bonnie cool down. He'd find a way to get her back in his possession. Meanwhile, Bonnie savoured her freedom. She quietly pulled some meat from the soup, added it to the pasta, and fed her little family. She kept reflecting to herself. The air in the apartment seemed fresher, and the children hadn't even asked where their father had gone. With his departure, everyone felt happier, more peaceful, more serene. Even fate seemed to be on Bonnie's side. Whilst searching online for a pie recipe, she stumbled upon an interesting advertisement. A new seaside hotel was hiring staff. They offered shift work with housing provided. The vacancies included cooks, waiters, and kitchen workers. A note mentioned that the hotel also accommodated preschool children, with a separate camp organised for them. Bonnie completed the online application without any hesitation, silently grateful for her interest in computers during her studying. Though Jeff had disapproved of her hobby, he had eventually bought her a friend's old, worn-out laptop after she convinced him she'd use it to find new recipes for him. As luck would have it, she didn't need to visit any employment agencies. 2 days ago, Bonnie received an email invitation for an interview. The branch office of this major coastal hotel chain was located in a modern business centre. How far Bonnie was from such a business-like beauty. However, she opened the door to the office confidently, and with equal confidence, she answered all the questions of an employee from personnel services. After listening to Bonnie, the woman fell silent for a moment before delivering her verdict. You have no practical work experience, which is a significant disadvantage, but we're willing to try you as a kitchen worker. You'll work under the cook's supervision, and we'll see how it goes. Your children can stay with you in our staff dormitory. We'll provide you with a separate room. Expenses for their accommodation will be deducted from your wages, but you'll still earn enough. Your shift starts May 25th, and the season ends September 25th. Bonnie flew home as if on wings, eager to tell her children the wonderful news. They had never seen the sea before. 4 months on the south coast. It was like a fairy tale. She didn't spare a thought for Jeff, his ultimatum, or her recent discoveries about him. She erased her husband from her life with a single stroke of her mental pen. She stepped into her new life with cheer and confidence. The hotel on the shore of the gentle sea exceeded all expectations Bonnie and her children had of paradise. Brand new and preparing to welcome its first tourists, it was magnificent. White stone buildings cascaded down to the beach amid subtropical greenery. Mature palm trees stood like exotic sentinels along the alleys. Secluded gazebos nestled in the thick vegetation on the slopes. Guests would arrive in a week to be served by 5 restaurants and bars. Bonnie was assigned to the vegetable preparation area. Despite the kitchen's abundance of modern appliances, vegetables were still peeled and washed the traditional way. Only afterward were they precisely cut with sharp knives and choppers. Large potatoes, long red carrots, pungent onions and round beets in shades from fuchsia to Bordeaux, soaked in large containers, cleaning off garden soil. Bonnie wasn't afraid of hard work. Though her eyes were fearful, her hands were capable. The kitchen team was competent, with no time for idle chat, only time to keep moving. A shuttle bus took everyone to the dormitory in the evenings. The children would be waiting for Bonnie there. Their small but cosy room was filled with peace and warm conversation. Despite their exhaustion, the whole trio would head straight to the sea. It was too cold for swimming. The waves rolled majestically to shore, just as they had for centuries, and the children were enchanted by the salty waters, walking until sunset before dinner. Thank goodness, the dormitory food was excellent. Bonnie wouldn't have had the energy to cook for the children here too. On opening day, from the restaurant windows, they watched a stream of cars bringing vacationers onto the property. Agile young men efficiently carried luggage to the buildings, while a well-dressed, cheerful crowd chatted animatedly at reception. Adjusting her headscarf, Bonnie was hurrying to accounting with paperwork when she noticed an unusual sight. There were 3 of them, a man in his 40s and 2 elderly people. She knew instinctively they were his parents. A charming elderly woman in a lace-trimmed silk dress, and her husband in light-coloured shorts, a palm tree printed shirt and a Panama hat. Though they made quite a picture, their son seemed completely at ease. He served his parents cool water with orange slices from the lounge bar, and then adjusted his mother's glasses and kissed her cheek. He rushed to handle their reservation. Bonnie felt a twinge of envy. Her own mother was no longer alive. However, smiling at the touching scene, she hurried to complete her task. She soon forgot about the devoted trio. The next day, the same caring son entered the kitchen through the back door. He was looking for the manager, who had gone to meet suppliers. The chef came out instead to speak with him, and he made his request. "My mother turns 80 in 3 days. This trip is my gift to her and my father. I'd like to order a special, unique cake from you. I've detailed everything here, including the ingredients needed." The chef unfolded the paper, read it slowly, moving her lips silently, then handed it back. "That's impossible. 1 cake with such a combination, meringue and soufflé, jelly, fondant, caramel, praline, marzipan, various types of biscuits, 3 kinds of cream, 2 glazes and exotic syrups for soaking. How do you know so much about confectionery? Are you a restaurateur?" "Actually, I'm an inventor and scientist, but my mother is a master confectioner. Though she only practiced her art at home, she spent her career as a cook on my father's team. I've been fortunate to enjoy her creations all my life. Now, I'd like her to receive a special cake as a surprise for her anniversary." The chef smiled. "You think too highly of our restaurant service. Such a masterpiece is beyond us. There are hundreds of tourists vacationing in the hotel right now. Your order is too unique for us to break away from our tasks and devote time to it. Besides, we don't have a pastry chef of that caliber on our staff." Later, Bonnie couldn't explain why. She, an unwitting witness to this conversation, stepped forward and asked to see the recipe. After all, she had only opened the back door for this man when he knocked. Where did this boldness come from? But when Bonnie read the description of the cake, she somehow knew she could handle it. Not even the chef's saucer-wide eyes embarrassed her. Her boss merely shook her head and said, "We'll relieve you of your other work for 24 hours. Everything else is now your responsibility. One more thing. Purchase the ingredients yourself, if you're so ambitious. Our service won't have time to deal with all that." The man, who had been listening attentively, immediately brightened. "I have my car here. I'll take you to all the necessary stores myself whenever it's convenient. There's not much time left before the anniversary, and my parents can manage without me for now. I've had them together for over 50 years. My father is an archaeologist. My ancestors were all on expeditions. I was born after they had already settled at home." He trailed off mid-sentence, looking at Bonnie inquisitively, while she gazed questioningly at her chief. Sighing heavily, the boss concluded, "All right, Bonnie, I'll give you another half a day tomorrow for grocery shopping. I'm curious myself whether such a cake is possible outside of confectionery fantasies. Go for it." At 8 o'clock the next morning, Bonnie and her unusual client were driving down a winding mountain road to a large local supermarket for cake ingredients. After about 10 minutes of silence, the man extended his hand and introduced himself. "I'm Malcolm, and you're Bonnie, right? I was thinking we should try the southern local market instead. Something tells me the butter, milk and fruit there will be more natural and higher quality. We have plenty of time. Let's go for a little walk." Bonnie flinched involuntarily, which didn't escape Malcolm's notice. "Did I say something wrong?" She smiled softly. No, it's fine. It's just that, because of circumstances, I don't like markets or even that word." Malcolm regarded her with curiosity. "Tell me why. We have quite a bit of time during our drive. I promise whatever you tell me will stay between us." Bonnie hesitated. Telling a stranger about her troubles seemed unthinkable, but she was so tired of suffering alone in this cauldron of mental anguish, so worn down by adult loneliness. These weren't things she could explain to her children. So unexpectedly, watching the mountain scenery flicker past the window, she found herself telling everything to her companion, who proved to be an incredible listener. After her story, Malcolm remained silent for a long while, lost in his own thoughts, before finally speaking. She could only listen and try to remember his words. "I'm very lonely too, Bonnie. Alone in my personal life. My wife left me when she learned I couldn't have children because of radiation exposure. I'm a nuclear physicist working in a classified facility. I don't regret anything. I live by the principle of who else but me." Then Bonnie interrupted him. "And I try to survive, raising my children in difficult conditions. But when I come home from work, 2 sons embrace me, and all my sadness vanishes like magic." "Oh, I'm sorry, Malcolm. Forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you with my words. A woman with her children always has light in her window, even in troubled times. That's all I meant." Malcolm couldn't understand why he felt compelled to be so open with her. This lovely woman awakened an unfamiliar warmth in him. He wanted to protect her, to shield her from all hardship, to stay by her side. He'd never felt such things, even for his wife. How had Bonnie so quickly found the key to his heart? After sharing their life stories, both realized they felt remarkably comfortable together. Bonnie calmly visited the market she usually avoided, selecting the finest ingredients for the cake. Meanwhile, Malcolm bought her a luxurious bouquet of roses. He earned well and hadn't spent money on a woman in ages, having only pampered his elderly parents. On their way back to the hotel, they stopped first at her dormitory. Bonnie wanted to put the roses in a vase to keep them fresh. She invited Malcolm to see how she and her children had settled in, and his heart ached again. The small room was somehow both homely and cosy, simple yet charming. He suddenly longed for Bonnie to welcome him home from work, to check his daily accomplishments, to serve him dinner, with or without meat. It didn't matter. At the hotel, they encountered Malcolm's parents walking along the shady alley. He quickly put his finger to his lips before introducing his companion, hinting that the cake remained a surprise. His mother gave him a subtle wink. His father discreetly raised his thumb. Malcolm's mood soared even higher. He handed his parents a bag of strawberries to take to their room, then carried the heavy bags into the kitchen with Bonnie. The anniversary was only 2 days away. Bonnie had poured her heart into what was clearly becoming a confectionery masterpiece. She had always loved the dessert classes most at culinary school. Malcolm visited the kitchen several times during her work, always with the same message. "Bonnie, do it however you think best. I trust you completely." Bonnie shooed him from the kitchen, insisting she would handle it herself and that outsiders weren't allowed. But Malcolm persisted. On his third visit at the end of her workday, he had a question. "I'll take you home to the dormitory. My parents are going to a live music concert at the hotel tonight. Perhaps we could all go along with your children. Go out and get ice cream?" But Bonnie, exhausted from working on the cake, had to decline. "Malcolm, let's save the treats for another day. I've been on my feet all day and I'm tired. I can't even take the children to the sea today." Malcolm was disappointed but didn't make a fuss. This woman was steadily claiming more space in his heart. For the first time, Malcolm couldn't enjoy his parents' rapturous appreciation of the saxophone. His thoughts dwelled only on Bonnie. He was amazed how she occupied his mind, appearing before him in light blue jeans and a light-coloured checkered shirt, making it impossible to focus on anything else. He tossed and turned all night, waiting for morning, when he and his parents would go to the restaurant for breakfast. They planned to present the cake at lunch. The waitresses had decorated the hall with balloons that Malcolm and Bonnie had bought the day before. The birthday girl arrived in full splendour, looking charming in her elegant summer dress, wide-brimmed hat and delicate sandals. Her eyes sparkled with warmth and joy. Everyone in the hall could see this was a woman who had lived a life filled with love. While her husband and son attended to her, Bonnie wheeled out her confectionery creation. Even a novice could tell this was a cake crafted with extraordinary imagination. On a beautiful platter stood a mound of ancient Scythian treasures. Chests filled with edible gold and silver, precious stones, helmets and chocolate spears. Above it all stood a sorceress in a soft pink caramel dress, holding a ladle. Flirtatious, graceful, lovely. Everyone immediately understood this composition represented the celebrant. The elderly woman burst into tears. "Darling, you created this miracle yourself. It's a jewel of confectionery. I could never make something like this." She gave Bonnie a heartfelt embrace. "Now, my friends, let's not waste time. The speeches can wait. Let's taste this cake. I've always had such a sweet tooth." While everyone in the hall shared pieces of Bonnie's sweet creation, she tried to slip quietly into the back rooms. Malcolm caught her at the last moment. "Bonnie, thank you so much. This is absolutely divine. I brought 3 pieces for you and the children. I'm sorry I couldn't get more." Bonnie turned, tears in her eyes. "My husband would have eaten all 3 pieces himself, Malcolm. He wouldn't have thought of me or the children. I never knew men could be like you, so thoughtful and generous." She sighed and disappeared into the kitchen. Malcolm knew this wasn't the moment to follow her, to speak, to offer comfort. He had another week at the hotel, and he would dedicate it to this poor woman. He would show her that the right man strives to make his woman happy, not take from her. And soon it all happened. They grew close quickly, disregarding their guilty consciences and conventional morality. Before meeting him, Bonnie hadn't known love could be so consuming, that she could lose herself so completely in another person, experiencing this otherworldly feeling of mutual need. She had never imagined a man could cherish a woman with words that flowed like sweet streams from his soul. On her day off, after the cake triumph, she invited Malcolm to her dormitory while the children were at the park. She embraced him as soon as the door closed. He didn't resist, didn't question, didn't judge. It was their pure happiness. Malcolm then fell into a deep sleep, and Bonnie lay staring at the ceiling. She remembered her mother. Already seriously ill, her mother had once called Bonnie to her bedside for a heart-to-heart talk. "Daughter, it's clear that soon you'll be alone. I'm not going to make it, but somehow I know you won't repeat my bitter loneliness without a man, won't spend the rest of your life moping around, wetting your pillow with tears. Don't think I'm teaching you anything wrong. When you meet your man, test your feelings through physical love. I'm not talking about sin, but something else. If you feel drawn to embrace him, if he reaches out to you too, don't hesitate. Let tenderness guide you. Now Bonnie felt infinitely sorry that her first experience had been with Jeff. With Malcolm, everything was different. She had known she wanted to be with him from the moment she accepted his bouquet of roses, while they worked on the cake for his mother when she invited him to the dormitory today. In earthly love, shame falls silent. The need to be loved comes first. Bonnie didn't even dwell on the fact that they only had 6 days left. Then Malcolm and his parents would leave, and she would return to her closet with unpeeled vegetables. Cinderella would be left without her beloved prince. She would have to live on memories of their love. Such was her fate, in her mind, and she agreed to that. Meanwhile, Jeff was restless. As he pondered about all the situation, realization struck him. Fine, let Bonnie go to the market. Let her buy whatever food she wants. Let everyone in the house eat meat. He'd agreed to work tirelessly for them, but Bonnie must return to the stall of their family. He hadn't realized she was such a stubborn creature. And the most strange was that she vanished. He had visited her apartment twice already. No one there. It seemed impossible. She couldn't have disappeared into thin air with the children. After a few more days of hesitation, Jeff used the keys to their shared apartment. Fortunately, she hadn't thought to take them from him. The man was going to investigate. There must be some clue to where his wife was hiding. He entered the apartment with trepidation. It was clean and empty. Only a laptop sat on the table, and Jeff had an idea. Perhaps he'd find her traces there. Jeff himself was clueless about computers. He only knew how to use the TV and refrigerator, but there was a computer enthusiast at his work. He'd help with this task. His colleague quickly examined the laptop. Bonnie hadn't set any passwords, and immediately found her recent searches and correspondence. Even slow-witted Jeff understood immediately. His rebellious wife had secured a job at a new seaside resort hotel, and he would soon be on vacation. He'd surprise her and the kids. He had every right to go to the sea. At that moment, Bonnie was giving Malcolm a final embrace. His parents tactfully stepped aside, pretending to get water for the journey, while she could barely breathe against him. Her tears had dried up. She steeled herself, whispering internally, "Don't show anything. Don't upset him. It's over. Not all dreams come true. You can handle this. You'll manage." Malcolm studied her face for a moment and asked, "Why do you keep moving your lips, as if holding back words? Have you convinced yourself, silly girl, that I'm leaving you for good?" Bonnie nodded silently. Malcolm pulled her close again and whispered in her ear, "I just need to settle things at work. I have so much accumulated vacation time that I can spend the whole summer with you by the sea, but I have much bigger plans. I don't want to be with you only in the summer. I want to fall asleep and wake up with you every day on the same pillow. You'll come with me. I have a house in the academic town, and I want you to be its mistress. While I'm away, please start the divorce proceedings. Why wait? I don't want the woman I love to remain married to a stranger. And please, talk gently with the children about how they'd feel about me becoming their father. I want to take you far from this town. I've already told my parents I want to marry you. They're overjoyed that you have children. They'll have grandchildren to dote on." Time inexorably counted down. The final minutes. Long farewells, long tears. That's how people describe separations. Yet these two loving hearts shed no tears. There was only a slight sadness, trembling within their great happiness. They felt grateful for everything they had shared and were full of hope for their future together. Bonnie watched as the car headed north. It was her day off, but the woman decided to head to the kitchen immediately rather than wait for tomorrow. Work would help distract her from her thoughts and rainbow-coloured plans. Within minutes, Bonnie transformed into her usual self, a quiet woman with bright eyes, methodically cleaning potatoes. By 8 o'clock, Bonnie felt exhausted but satisfied, conveying her impressive stock of cleaned vegetables. They could catch the last service bus back to the hotel, where light already glowed invitingly from their room window. The children must be home, probably watching TV instead of sleeping. Climbing the metal ladder quickly, Bonnie opened the door and froze. At the table sat Jeff, chewing on a pie and sipping coffee from a large mug. He turned at the sound and sneered. "Here comes my wifey home. Had your fun at last? Come in, darling. Tell me what you've been up to. Leaving your legitimate husband?" "What are you doing here?" Bonnie demanded. "Ran out of meat at the market back home." Jeff lunged at her with unexpected agility, like a grizzly bear, his breath hot on her face. "I'm a legitimate guest at your hotel. I booked a room. I've been watching you for a day. You were too distracted to notice. Saw you carrying on with some man. Shameless. But I'll forgive your lover and your games. Let's go to my room. Time to work on baby number 3. You like children, don't you, wife? Ready to wait me up from work? Cook meal for your dear husband?" Bonnie was overwhelmed. How had he found her? How had he gotten here? Jeff seemed to read her thoughts. "Your laptop gave you away and people helped me figure it out. Just showed my passport at reception. Said I wanted to surprise my wife because our wedding anniversary is in 3 days. The managers were quite helpful." Bonnie's mind raced as she desperately sought a way to escape, to drive her husband away. He became increasingly insistent, but Bonnie refused his advances. Disgusted, she gathered all her strength and pushed her husband away, threatening to call the guards if he didn't leave her room immediately. Jeff glared at her, but obeyed, leaving with a parting threat that he would continue pursuing her until she realized she was his destiny. Alone now, Bonnie tried calling Malcolm, but his phone was out of range. She felt helpless, too drained even to cry. She couldn't tell if Malcolm's silence was mere unfortunate timing or if he had deliberately cut her from his life. The next morning, Bonnie filed for divorce electronically. She would never again submit to Jeff's will. Meanwhile, Malcolm was deeply troubled. A major scientific experiment was scheduled at work in the coming weeks, and his presence was essential. His colleagues depended on him completely. For the first time, his devotion to work created conflict. His heart was torn between love and duty, unable to abandon either his colleagues at this crucial moment or Bonnie. He called to explain his delay, but she responded with cool detachment, as if she'd expected this. When he tried to explain the emergency, she cut the conversation short, promising to call back later to discuss everything. She never did, not that day nor the next. Finally, Malcolm had no choice but to immerse himself in his scientific project. Working day and night, he would return home so exhausted that he would only collapse into bed and fall into deep sleep. The week with Jeff felt like imprisonment for Bonnie, though she had one small mercy. He no longer attempted to get close to her. He occupied himself with the children, went to the sea and slept in his own room. To outsiders, they appeared like a normal family, celebrating their wedding anniversary. On their anniversary day, he bought her a bouquet of daisies and got home the next day. Bonnie tried not to dwell on Malcolm's silence. He had his beloved physics now. Hadn't he himself joked about being married to protons and neutrons? What had she expected? That he would abandon everything for their love? It seemed unrealistic, even absurd. Though she missed him terribly, she refused to call him. If they were meant to be together, it would happen. Until then, she would wait and just work. A week after Jeff's departure, Bonnie's career took an unexpected turn. Another cake order arrived, remarkably similar to her first success. An enthusiastic mother wanted to organise a children's party at the hotel, bubbling with creative ideas. She envisioned an elaborate cake shaped like a red car, accompanied by various pastries, cupcakes, muffins, cookies, and specialty desserts. She insisted on only the finest, most exclusive treats for her child's table, regardless of cost. "We can't dedicate that much time to your order. The hotel is at capacity, and we're barely managing our buffet duties. Though we have bakeries at our resort, we're short-staffed during peak hours," the manager explained, but paused when the chef whispered something. "However, we do have one exceptional staff member. I've been considering moving them to the pastry department." The customer's eyes lit up. "We'll meet all your conditions. When can we speak with this pastry chef?" They summoned Bonnie immediately, and she agreed to help the devoted mother realise her vision. The children's party was magical, complete with exciting entertainment, treats, a big red car, cakes, and everything else on the list. When the customer discovered that Bonnie's children were staying at the hotel, she immediately included them in the party, and after celebration, she handed Bonnie a thick envelope. "My son was happy today, thanks to you. I sincerely wish that everything works out the way you want it to. You are wonderful." To Malcolm, the airplane seemed to crawl like a turtle through the sky. He counted down not hours but minutes until he would see his beloved. At the hotel, however, devastating news awaited him. Bonnie had broken her contract a month before its end. He frantically searched the hotel for any information about her, going mad with despair. He cursed physics and all its scientific mysteries. Just as he was about to fly to Bonnie's hometown to search for her, a woman from the computer game room beckoned him over. "I can't watch you suffer like this. I helped Bonnie submit her electronic divorce petition. Her husband showed up here. I don't know what happened between them, but Bonnie wasn't herself while he was here. She left suddenly, without explanation. I have a copy of the divorce petition with her address. If you care about her, go find her. She's a good person. I know you'll be happy together." Bonnie was cooking dumplings when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. As she walked to open it, she wondered who it could be. She had already dealt with Jeff by presenting him with the divorce petition and threatening legal action if he ever bothered her again. Jeff had retreated like a coward, throwing one last bitter remark. "Do you think you're a princess? But who needs you with 2 children? Who would take on such a burden? I'm not your helper anymore, and just so you know, anyone will be happy to marry me because I am a man. And that's it. You lost your last chance." When Bonnie opened the door, she stepped back in shock. There stood her Malcolm, holding a large bouquet of roses and several packages. "How did you find me?" Bonnie wanted to shout down the hallway, but her lips barely moved from the rush of emotions. He stepped forward and embraced her tightly. "Why did you run away? I nearly lost my mind when I couldn't find you at the hotel." Bonnie, refusing to hide her feelings, looked straight into his eyes and explained. "My husband came to see me, and I feared he would always hover over me. When you didn't respond, I thought this was all self-deception, that you really didn't need me. You had your physics at home, maybe even another woman. I thought I was just a vacation romance to you." Malcolm smiled. "What made you think you should make such decisions for both of us? Let me just call my parents to tell them I found you safely. Then we can eat. I'm starving. Do you have an extra plate and fork for me? I bought plenty of groceries." Bonnie suddenly remembered the dumplings on the stove and rushed to the kitchen, hearing Malcolm talking to his parents. "Mum, don't worry. Everything's fine. I found her. Tell Dad the good news. When are we coming? As soon as Bonnie's packed. We haven't decided what she wants to bring yet." Malcolm's voice trailed off, and Bonnie turned around. There he stood in the kitchen doorway. Her man. Her love. She saw such adoration in his eyes that her knees weakened. They moved toward each other, once again lost in their magical connection. Bonnie might have contemplated the happiness awaiting her, but one thought crossed her mind. How fortunate it was that Jeff's selfishness with food had inadvertently led her to true happiness. This is how a fasting diet can sometimes lead to a bright future rather than mere sadness. "Hello, Nancy," the older woman greeted warmly. "Hello, Mrs. Arrington." Nancy nodded in reply. "It's so hot today. Do you always sell here? I think it would be better in the shade." "Well, this spot is good. It's near the bus stop, so more people come by," Nancy responded with a smile. "Well, give me a litre jar then." The young woman adjusted her white headscarf, which concealed her long curly hair, and stooped behind the makeshift counter where she was selling homemade milk. Nancy had the look of a true villager, strong, sturdy, with a robust posture. Her slightly rough skin was tanned, but it didn't detract from her appearance. On the opposite, it added a simple charm. "You're as busy as a bee," Mrs. Harrington exclaimed. "I have to be. My mother is ill and I'm raising my son alone. We all need money these days. No one will feed us for free." "Yes, we all miss your Tom. He was a good man. It's a shame he died so young and left you alone," the elderly woman said sympathetically. Nancy gazed downward, her lower lip caught between her teeth in sadness. The sharp sting of loss had faded over the years, but the memories of her husband, a casualty at his workplace, still haunted her. "He was such a great forest man. He knew every twig in the forest and never let the poachers off the hook. He was constantly chasing them." "That's why they killed him," Nancy whispered. "How cruel they were! A gunshot to his back? How could anyone murder over some worthless fur? It's all because of this hunting business." "The worst part is that they never caught his murderer. The case was either silenced or there was no evidence." "It's all bribes from those villains." Mrs. Arrington dismissed her with a wave of her hand. "Our new gamekeeper, curse him! He is much more compliant than Tom. He avoids disputes with poachers, and look at him now, living a good life. Where does he get his money? He must be making a fortune." "Yes, it's impossible to earn that much by honest labour in our neck of the woods," Nancy replied with a sad grin. "Our district isn't that wealthy. I work on a farm, and even then it's not enough. I had to get my own cow and sell milk on the highway during weekends. That's how we make ends meet." "You poor thing. Why did such a good person end up with such a difficult life?" Mrs. Arrington shook her head sympathetically. "Well, I must get going. I have things to do at home, and I should put the milk in the fridge before it sours in the heat." "Goodbye," Nancy waved. She waited until Mrs. Arrington was out of sight before sinking heavily into her chair. The only customer in an hour was an acquaintance. Business was slow today, and the intense heat wasn't helping. "Phew, it's so hot. I can hardly breathe," Nancy said, touching her kerchief. "And there's nobody around. If something were to happen, there would be no one to help." Suddenly, her vision blurred. Nancy tried to stand, but her legs gave way, and she collapsed by the roadside, unconscious. "Should we call an ambulance?" a male voice called out from somewhere. Nancy tried carefully to open her eyes, wondering how much time had passed since she fell. She was roused by someone gently slapping her cheeks and sprinkling cool water on her face from a bottle. "Just wasting time," a female voice suddenly remarked. Nancy realized she was lying on the ground. The unexpected rescuer was not in sight, but a luxurious car parked directly in front of her drew her attention. A fancy car like that couldn't belong to someone poor. "How can you say that? What if she needs medical assistance? What if she doesn't regain consciousness?" a man retorted in indignation. "As if I care. Look, she's already opened her eyes," a woman retorted irritably. A worried stranger's face soon came into Nancy's view. He was well groomed with dark hair and a neat beard, Nancy's gaze shifted slightly and landed on a tidy name tag reading, Harris, First Class Driver. "Are you okay?" the man asked sympathetically. "I think so. Yes, I'm sorry," Nancy whispered. "Let me help you up." The driver extended his hand, allowing Nancy to lean on him as he gently helped her to her feet. Now Nancy could freely look around and noticed a young woman in the back seat of the car. She also could assess the stature and strength of her unexpected saviour. He was a striking man, with vibrant green eyes, gleaming with unquenchable optimism. However, now his face was filled with worry. "Are you sure you're okay? Should we call for help?" the driver asked. "Are we leaving today or not?" The woman in the car immediately interrupted him. "Becky, why are you so rude?" the man said to her, and the woman snorted, crossing her arms over her chest. She was looking indifferently at Nancy, conveying her lack of interest in the plight of a mere peddler. Becky was a rich young woman, known for her impeccable looks and fashion sense. Unlike Nancy, she was admired for her graceful figure and perfect proportions. Her skin was flawless and firm, without any extra muscle or tan line. It was clear that Becky invested a lot of time and used high-end cosmetics to maintain her appearance. "Don't be embarrassed. I'm from the provinces myself. Therefore, I am always ready to help rural people." The driver smiled, taking Nancy's hiccup on his own account. "Thank you. I apologize for your delay." Nancy couldn't help but smile back. "I think you should end your work for today. I would walk you home, but I need to drive my passenger." He motioned towards Becky. "You must have broken some kind of rules to help me, huh? Will you be all right?" "Yes, he will," Becky hissed vindictively. "I'll make sure to tell my father that we're late because he decided to flirt with the milkmaids." Nancy looked at Becky in surprise. As a simple villager, she was not used to such open hostility, especially from a stranger who she had never wronged. "Report to whomever you wish. I couldn't leave a woman in trouble." Harris waved off dismissively. Becky's threats didn't seem to have made an impression on him, but Nancy felt awkward. "Excuse me, and thank you for your help." She frowned. "Now go, just go. I'll get home on my own." "Dad, can you believe it?" Becky shrieked from the threshold as soon as she and Harris arrived at the house. "What happened?" Mr. Mayor asked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. This elegant gentleman epitomized the image of dignity and trustworthiness. Despite his age, he maintained a proud posture and an aura of confidence. The slight wrinkles on his face enhanced his dignified image, reflecting a wealth of life experience. "Instead of taking me home, your driver was flirting with some kind of milkmaids," Becky accused, glaring at her father. "Really?" Mr. Mayor looked even more surprised. "Harris, what happened?" The driver had just entered the house, carrying Becky's bags. "You see, we were driving along the highway, and there was a woman selling milk near a stop. She fainted from the heat. I saw it and I stopped to help her. You know, bring her to her senses." "And is that all?" grinned Becky's father. "Daughter, you need to be considerate. You're surrounded by real people, not robots." "Do we owe her anything? We can't save everyone," the girl hissed in anger. "What's wrong with stopping to help? Human life is no joke. If someone falls ill in front of you, the normal reaction is to offer help." "Why are you talking to me like a child? I'm actually 25 years old, if you haven't noticed," Becky exclaimed angrily. "Well, if you're an adult, then stop acting like a child and behave yourself," Mr. Mayor immediately retorted. He deeply loved his only daughter, who was a living reminder of his wife, who had tragically died from an illness. But at times, Becky was unbearable, throwing tantrums without reason. Whether this was a result of her upbringing or resolved teenage rebellion, Mr. Mayor was uncertain. He didn't know how to rectify this behaviour, but he held on to the hope that with time his daughter would mature and become more reasonable. "As you say," the girl snorted and then left the room, slamming the door defiantly. "Harris, do you think that woman is decent?" asked the man unexpectedly. I don't know, we didn't have much time to socialise, shrugged the driver, but she was very embarrassed about delaying us and seemed more concerned about me getting in trouble for violating regulations than her health. Can you find her? Ask her if she would like to work for me as a maid. Well, I don't think finding her will be a problem. I remember the place where she has been selling her products. But why her? You see, a maid works right in the house. She will be in constant contact with us and know pretty much everything that's going on. That's why I don't want to hire anyone from a professional agency. Lately, rumours have started circulating that employees of such offices like to leak information to their employers. Are you afraid of business rivals? Harris nodded understandingly. Yes, because I've run into them many times. I found bugs after electricians and cameras. I have too big business and too much money in production. And you think a girl from the countryside wouldn't consider engaging in espionage out of the goodness of her heart? Harris frowned. The suggestion seemed to upset Harris. The driver, a simple man from the suburbs, had started working for Mr. Mayer purely by chance. He enjoyed working for the businessman, who was known for his fairness and good treatment of his employees. Yet, amidst such luxury, Harris still felt improper. Just hope that a man from the province will be nobler, above these underhanded intrigues, Mr. Mayer. Harris's thoughts didn't escape his watchful eye, therefore he added, especially since I have one good example of such a man. The man winked at Harris, who, realizing the reference was to him, became slightly embarrassed. His relationship with Mr. Mayer felt more fatherly than that of a subordinate to a superior. Over the years, Harris had developed sincere respect for the businessman, who had seen life and always listened to his opinion, even if they sometimes disagreed. And furthermore, Mr. Mayer continued, I need a quick, unpretentious, hard-working woman who doesn't command an excessively high salary. So you want to save money? Harris muttered. I just don't want to overpay for an agency brand name. Don't worry, I won't cut into her salary. She'll certainly earn more than from selling milk at the bus stop. Almost immediately after their conversation, Harris went to search for a future maid. However, she was nowhere to be found. There were no passers-by who knew the saleswoman as well. I should have escorted her home, then I would have gotten her address, the driver said to himself as he examined the empty bus stop. What upset him most was that he was the one who advised her to go home to avoid another fainting spell. Should I leave a note? Harris lingered, scanning his surroundings, but without any clues to her address, he decided to return the following day. A note with his address or personal number could easily fall into the wrong hands, and considering Mr. Mayer's excessive suspiciousness, it was best not to disturb him. Moreover, he had been complaining about his troubled heart lately, so there was no need for additional stress. Oh, come on, Harris grumbled, finding the bus stop empty again. This was the second time out of luck. He didn't even know the saleswoman's schedule. Would she return? Harris was determined to keep his word to Mr. Mayer, so he resolved to continue his attempts. Hello! I finally found you here, Harris exclaimed on the third day. Luck was finally on his side, and he jumped joyfully out of the car upon spotting the woman in a white headscarf. Good afternoon, she responded, smiling shyly. His unexpected appearance made her cautious. However, the handsome driver didn't seem threatening, and the fact that he had visited for days just to see her warmed the lonely woman's heart. I completely forgot to introduce myself last time. I'm Harris. It's a pleasure to meet you here, in consciousness. Nancy. Beautiful name. Harris smiled. Nancy, would you be interested in a job change? My boss is offering a position as a maid at his country estate. It's nearby, and the work is pleasant. What kind of maid am I? Nancy responded, gesturing dismissively. It's nothing difficult. Your main duties would be maintaining cleanliness and order in the house. Occasionally you might need to run errands for Mr. Mayer, my boss. I'm not sure. Give it some thought. What's there to lose? It's a job in a big, beautiful house, and certainly beats standing on the curb selling milk. The offer was tempting from the start, but Nancy knew it just wasn't possible. As she understood it, a maid's job required her to be constantly at her employer's home. "I simply can't stay away from my home for a long time," Nancy replied, her gaze faltering. "I need to take care of my mother, and I have a son as well." "Don't even worry about it. Mr. Mayor assumed you wouldn't want to leave your household, so there will be no need for you to live in his house. I will bring you and take you back every day. No transportation problems, and all at the employer's expense. Give it some thought. It's a great job opportunity." "Well, there is some truth in what you say," Nancy muttered. "Why not give it a try?" "Great. Shall we go to the interview? I'll just let Mr. Mayor know." "Harris, I'm sorry, but first I have to take the rest of the milk home," Nancy interrupted the driver. "Wait for me here. I'll be right back." "Oh, don't even worry. I have a car. I'll take you." This time, Harris decided not to miss the opportunity to find out Nancy's address, so as not to lose contact. "Well, I see you're a decent woman, hard-working, dexterous. Quite a match for me," Mr. Mayor said. "Thank you. I tried," Nancy smiled. The interview was a bit strange. The businessman didn't want to waste time on long conversations, so he immediately asked the potential employee to clean one of the rooms. "Well, if it goes on like this, we're in for a very profitable cooperation. You can start your duties tomorrow, and here is a salary, payable at the beginning and middle of the month." Nancy modestly accepted the envelope. Even at first glance, there was 10 times more money than she was paid on the farm, not to mention the milk trade. And another paycheck was expected in just 2 weeks. "There's too much here. I'm afraid you're overestimating me," Nancy muttered, offering the envelope back. "Nancy, I'm a business person. Profitable investments are my job. Trust me, my company never wastes money." Nancy had already been a maid for several weeks. She was diligent in her duties, and after receiving the rest of her salary, she became even more committed. "Get out of my way!" Becky's displeased voice rang out suddenly. "What?" Nancy, busy dusting the cupboards, did not immediately respond to Mr. Mayor's daughter's command, resulting in a sharp nudge to her side. "Are you deaf?" Becky snapped. "I'm sorry." The woman quickly moved to the opposite end of the room, trying to stay out of sight of the volatile young woman. Becky had disliked the new maid from the first day, constantly attempting to humiliate or tease her. "By the way, make sure you change the linens by tomorrow. If I have to sleep on dirty sheets one more time because of you—" "They're fresh," Nancy said quietly. "Are you still arguing?" Becky advanced menacingly towards the maid, even swinging her hand. "Becky, your father is calling for you," said Harris, entering the room. "What are you doing here?" "None of your business," Becky shouted. "Okay, but your father is still waiting for you." Becky turned abruptly and quickly left the room, causing the door jambs to rattle with another slam. "Hysterical girl," Harris said at her back, and turned to Nancy. "What's your problem?" "Nothing," Nancy replied, barely audible. Harris squinted at the maid, shrinking in the corner. It was apparent that Mr. Mayor's daughter was intentionally attacking the new employee, harbouring hatred at some subconscious level. "Do you want me to tell Mr. Mayor anything?" Harris suggested, referring to Becky's antics. "Don't. He'll be upset. I don't want to cause trouble in the family." The woman shook her head. "But this can't continue." "It's okay." "You're too kind." Harris sighed. "I wish I could scold her, even though she's already a grown woman. But who's going to let me? I'm also a subordinated person." Nancy smiled at his support, and Harris, for the umpteenth time, noted her natural beauty, which was increasingly captivating him. "And what time will you be home today?" he asked. "I'll be a bit late. You heard it yourself. Becky wants new bedding." "Why don't you let me help you then?" "Oh, then that fool will claim that you've spilled oil all over her car," Nancy smiled. considering that I've never opened the hood myself, and all the work is done by the mechanics at the service," Harris chuckled. At this moment, unable to pull himself together, Harris moved closer to the maid and suddenly kissed her on the lips. She blushed, feeling like a schoolgirl sneaking a kiss with her lover under the stairs. Nancy stood on her toes and reciprocated the kiss. She felt as comfortable and at ease with Harris as never before. "Who would have thought that I'd have to thank my work for a relationship with such a beautiful woman?" The man smiled gently. "It happened because you're a bad driver," sighed Nancy languidly. "Why's that?" "Because you were looking at me more than at the road." "I just felt a mutual interest and decided not to miss the opportunity." Harris winked. "Sometimes I think I shouldn't agree to a date so quickly," Nancy smiled. "We missed the stage where the gallant knight wins the lady's heart. But we can get to the most interesting part," the driver whispered conspiratorially before kissing her again. "I think that's what's bothering Becky most of all." "What's the big deal? Do you think she's interested in me?" "Of course. How could anyone overlook a handsome man with such a huge ego?" Nancy giggled, poking Harris in the chest with her fist. "Seriously speaking, she's just used to considering everyone around her as her property. And now, it turns out, I've taken her toy." "Maybe." The man shook his head. "Oh, I completely forgot. I need to get more gas before we hit the road. I'm sorry, I won't be able to help you with making the bed, or I won't have a vehicle to drive you home." "Go then." Nancy smiled and returned to her duties. "Nancy, come here, please." Mr. Mayer's voice came from the kitchen. "Yeah? What's happened?" she asked, opening the door. "Well, it's me who wanted to ask you what happened here." The landlord pointed melancholically to an overturned flower pot, its soil scattered all over the floor. "I'm sorry. I'll clean it up right away," the maid exclaimed. "Yes, please do, before the soil scatters all over the house." Mr. Mayer nodded. "And the guest room is a mess too. I've been finding too much clutter lately. Please pay closer attention to the house, and more frequently." "I'm sorry, it won't happen again," Nancy muttered, blushing. She felt embarrassed to be reprimanded. Mr. Mayer was a very patient man, and he rarely scolded her, understanding that it was challenging to constantly monitor such a large house. He simply pointed out the mistakes so they wouldn't go unnoticed. But the most frustrating part was that the increasing disturbances in different parts of the house were not accidental. "By the way, Becky asked again for you to be fired. Why don't you get along with her?" As if by accident, the businessman asked. "I don't know. Apparently she thinks I'm not professional enough," the woman answered modestly. "Well, Nancy, try to make peace with her. Harmony at home is a crucial element of life." "I will," she responded. However, it didn't depend on Nancy. In fact, Becky constantly created a mess on purpose and then swiftly ran to her father to highlight Nancy's negligence. Naturally, Nancy couldn't clean everything in time, which left Mr. Mayer thinking she was lazy and not very diligent. However, the businessman was not quick to dismiss the new employee because of her diligent ethic in the first weeks of work. "Yes, it's a large house. It's unfortunate that Tammy, Becky's mother, left so early. She had everything under control. Now it's just a semblance of a family home," Mr. Mayer said, a note of sadness in his voice. "I sympathize with you. My husband also passed away early, and it's challenging to fill that void. But it's never too late to let another person into your heart," Nancy cautiously consoled her host. "I suppose it's a bit late for me," replied Mr. Mayer, rubbing his chest. "I used to think the same, but you know, the main thing is to meet the right person." The man shuddered. Memories of Tammy caused a painful sting in his heart, leading to another round of unpleasant spasms. "Would you like some water?" suggested Nancy, full of anxiety. "No." "Oh!" Mr. Mayer staggered, then lost consciousness. Did you two lovebirds knock Daddy out? Becky hissed, her anger directed at the driver and the maid. What does this have to do with us? Harris retorted. Everything. Your negligence stressed him out, leading him to the hospital. He suffered a heart attack. We don't know when he'll be back. Nancy sobbed. The unfortunate attack had happened before her eyes, and she was still worried, actually considering herself guilty. When she saw him on the floor, she was confused, thought too long, and called an ambulance only 5 minutes later. At first, she went looking for Harris, then Becky. Only then did she realize she was alone and began dialing the ambulance, her fingers trembling over the keys. I've had enough of you two. While my father is receiving treatment, I'm in charge. As the mistress of this house, my first action is to fire both of you. Pack your things and leave. After reprimanding her former subordinates, Becky stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Go to the hell. Harris, don't. Nancy urged Harris. Let's go. Nothing can be fixed now. It's better for us to leave peacefully. You're right. Let's visit Mr. Mayer. He's been in the hospital for days, and she hasn't visited him once. She doesn't care about how her not-young father feels, as long as she gets her hands on the family's money. But we're there almost every day. He might be sick of us. No, the doctors say social interaction and positive emotions are the best medicine. Let's go. Don't tell him she fired us. We shouldn't give any extra stress. Let him get better without such news. Of course, Harris agreed. He left the official car keys and documents, took Nancy's hand and led her to his old car. It wasn't as flashy as the owner's, but it was well kept and functional. The drive to the hospital took about half an hour. How are you doing, Chief? Harris cheerfully asked as they were led to Mr. Mayer's room. I'm hanging in there. The businessman attempted a smile. Hello, Nancy greeted him with a sad smile. Mr. Mayer tried to brace himself and even attempted to get up, but it was clear to see he was not feeling well. Is Becky not with you? Mr. Mayer asked hopefully. Sorry, no, Nancy replied, shaking her head. She's busy, planning to inherit and lead your empire. Harris couldn't help himself and replied. She's never had any family feelings, Mr. Mayer sighed, and she has always been a real headache. I suppose I failed in raising her. It's understandable. She grew up without a mother. It might have affected her, Nancy proposed, shrugging her shoulders. I tried my best to fill in for Tammy, but, whispered the sick man with difficulty. Enough of this. Let's cheer up, Harris interjected, clapping his hands together. By the way, is everything okay with you two? Becky isn't causing any trouble, is she? Mr. Mayer asked. Harris and Nancy glanced at each other and then shook their heads almost in unison. No, not at all. Everything's fine. The woman replied quickly. Well, at least that's good news, the businessman said, smiling with relief. What are the doctors saying? Harris quickly shifted the conversation in a different direction. Oh, nothing good. I've been lying here for days with no relief, Mr. Mayer grumbled. They say I need surgery, but honestly, I'm scared. Why? The driver raised an eyebrow. You've never been afraid, have you? Well, Becky consulted some specialists and then called me. She said I might not need this procedure because of my age and weakened body. She's convinced me to look for alternative treatments. I did some research as well, or rather, I read on the internet, Nancy interrupted. For your illness, there are no alternative treatments, just surgery. But why did Becky suggest waiting? The businessman frowned. I'm not sure, but I also haven't heard about a high mortality rate. In fact, they say it's a relatively simple operation. It's often performed successfully, with only a small percentage of lethal outcomes, even for patients your age. I think you should follow the doctor's recommendations. Harris joined his girlfriend. They looked at each other, clearly understanding Becky's motives. It was clear she intended to claim the family fortune and was dissuading her father from effective treatment with the hope of his demise.
It's still a little scary,
Mr. Mayor admitted, shaking his head. I understand what you're going through. Anyone would be afraid in this situation, but you're strong. You'll get through this, Nancy encouraged him with a smile.
I agree. You've always been brave. Look at the empire you've built. Confront your illness head-on, or it will consume you,
Harris advised.
Perhaps you're right. Maybe it's worth a try,
the businessman said weakly. Later that day, Mr. Mayor had a comprehensive discussion with the doctor, learning all the details and finally agreeing to proceed with the preparations.
Do not worry. Our clinic is top-notch. We have first-class specialists and the best equipment in the country. We will ensure the highest quality care. You won't notice any difference,
the doctor assured him after getting his signature on the documents.
I hope so. I don't care about any money, as long as the treatment helps.
That's the spirit. They say you can't buy health, but you can certainly invest in it. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. Despite his attempts to stay calm, Mr. Mayor could not help but feel nervous as the date approached. However, the excitement was in vain. The surgeons did a fantastic job, successfully resolving the issue that had been limiting the businessman's heart function.
Thank you, my dears, for convincing me to do it. It really worked.
Mr. Mayor smiled cheerfully at Nancy and Harris.
But why do you both look so grim?
You see, here's the thing, Nancy began hesitantly.
I'm sorry if this sounds harsh, Mr. Mayor, but your daughter has interfered in your business. She even convinced the board of directors that you were incurable.
Harris didn't hold back.
What?
The businessman asked, taken aback. I'm sorry, but it's true, admitted the former maid. You should have seen how angry she was when she found out the operation was successful.
It can't be,
Mr. Mayor gasped.
Sadly, it's true. We didn't want to tell you, but you were going to find out today anyway. It's better you hear it from us.
Harris shook his head.
She's cunning. She did everything she could to get what she wanted. She has transferred ownership of the house to herself and moved all the accounts and details. She became the sole owner of all the property. How can that be? We're family,
Mr. Mayor whispered, his lips barely moving. The chamber door suddenly swung open, revealing a furious Becky. Her eyes sparkled with anger and her superiority, like lightning in a storm.
Ah, great, everyone's here. Congratulations on the successful surgery, but it doesn't change anything. I'm the boss now, she hissed.
Daughter.
Shut up, old man. Why couldn't you just lie there and let me live peacefully? You're always dissatisfied with me, always meddling in my business. But now you can live wherever you want because I'm the boss. Are you trying to throw me out of my own house?
Mr. Mayor exclaimed.
It's mine now, and you can go wherever you want.
With that, Becky turned on her heels and stormed out of the room. A tense silence fell over the room. No one knew how to respond to what had just happened. What am I going to do now? Mr. Mayor sighed, his voice filled with sorrow.
The last money from my personal account went towards the operation. I can't even afford a hotel until I'm well enough to undo what Becky's done.
No hotels, Nancy said without hesitation. Now pack up. Take what you have and let's go to my place. My house is big enough. My mother and son live with me, but they won't mind.
It feels awkward. Why do you need me there?
Mr. Mayor started to refuse. No objections at all. Harris will drive us. Don't even think about resisting. I'm sorry, but I'm stronger than you right now. Nancy's eyebrows knitted together menacingly.
You've got a very spirited girlfriend,
Mr. Mayor chuckled, looking at Harris.
So, you knew we were dating? But how?
The driver asked, bewildered.
I was having heart problems, not eyesight problems. You two are so affectionate, always together. I knew exactly that such wonderful people had to be together. I knew it the moment I saw our lovely Nancy."
"That's great," she responded with a joyful smile. Packing took quite a bit of time. Mr. Mayer's belongings easily fit into a single suitcase, as he only brought necessities to the hospital. "Come in. Be careful, there's a step here," Nancy cautioned, leading the former chief to the porch.
"My dear, I'm not made of glass. Don't worry, everything is fine. It's just a little bit more, and you'll put me in the wheelchair."
Mr. Mayer smiled warmly. "I keep thinking you're struggling after the surgery," Nancy admitted, embarrassed.
"He's just lost a little weight. His rehabilitation period is now over. He will get a fresh air here, and soon he'll be back in shape in no time. Our Mr. Mayer is not one to give up,"
Harris said energetically.
"Is your mother okay with my visit?"
the businessman clarified. "She's delighted. It provides her some entertainment. It gets lonely when I'm at work. Plus, she will certainly enjoy the company of such a gallant and imposing man." Nancy giggled.
"Well, that's one way to put it," said Mr. Mayer, embarrassed. "Let's go say hello then."
The young woman moved towards her mother's room and carefully opened the door. "Are you awake?" she asked. "Of course, come in," the mother answered from behind the door. Suddenly a ringing voice made Mr. Mayer flinch. Oddly enough, the intonation seemed strikingly familiar, as if... Nancy opened the door, revealing her mother sitting in an armchair by the window. "How do you do? Pardon for me sitting. It's hard for me to stand. My name is—"
"Eleanor,"
the businessman interjected. He froze on the threshold, examining the familiar figure with disbelief. The woman's blonde hair, blue eyes that hadn't dimmed with age. Nancy's mother had managed to maintain her elegance and beauty, emanating a unique aura of wisdom.
"Sam?"
the woman said in surprise.
"But how did you find me?" "You have no idea. It's a long story."
The businessman exhaled, timidly stepping closer. "Do you two know each other?" Nancy asked, puzzled. "Yes, daughter," Eleanor smiled. "This is the same groom from my youth that I told you about. What's more, he is your own father."
"What?"
All present interrogated in one voice.
"Wait, but how? Is it really true?"
Mr. Mayer muttered. He sat opposite Eleanor, gently held her fingers and kissed them.
"Where did you disappear to, my love?"
"You see, everything happened too quickly back then. My father, do you remember him? He was always against our relationship. The day I finally mustered the courage to elope with you, he somehow found out. He whisked me away to another city and practically imprisoned me there. It was only later, when it was too late, that I discovered I was pregnant with Nancy. My father wouldn't let me contact you then, insisting we'd raise my daughter ourselves. Then events spiraled. Pregnancy, mum's death, adult life. Everything changed so drastically, and I couldn't find you anymore."
"My poor girl. How did you cope?"
Mr. Mayer sighed sorrowfully.
"Well, it wasn't easy, but Nancy always gave me the strength not to give up."
Eleanor smiled.
"Everything will be fine now. We're finally together," said the man confidently. "What a twist!" Harris whistled.
"Wait, I didn't understand anything. Are you serious about Mr. Mayer being my father?" Nancy asked, standing frozen, as if afraid to forget the sudden news she had heard. She didn't dare look directly at the man she thought she knew well, yet in reality knew not at all.
"Yes, it's true, and the fact that you have met is a true miracle," her mother confirmed. "We're all together, at last."
Nancy sobbed happily, rushing to embrace her parents. A strange warmth filled Mr. Mayer's chest,
bringing a sense of tranquility. "Do I have to ask you for your wedding blessing, Chief?" Harris teased, lightening the mood and drawing laughter from everyone present. Several weeks passed since their reunion. The family began settling into village life, managing their own household. Nancy returned to her old job, while Harris found work as a driver on the same farm. "Well, will you manage here without us?" Nancy asked. "What will happen to us?" Mr. Mayor responded with a grin. "Well, you're not used to it, I suppose, in the village. Not a city or a rich mansion, after all," Nancy shrugged. "Not a mansion. It's even better. Here, you know, the air is different," Mr. Mayor replied, inhaling a full breath. He had fully recovered from the operation, regaining his old self, and now he didn't look like an old man at all, flaunting a trim figure and noble grey hair. "This place is good for both body and soul. Nothing superfluous. Everything as it should be," Mr. Mayor said thoughtfully. "You know, I don't even regret my wealth. I created my business for your mother, to find her, but I couldn't. Who knew that a mere accident would bring us together?" "Accidents are not accidents, dear," said Eleanor, coming up behind him. Her health, too, had improved lately. She was getting up more often, moving around the house more confidently. She and Mr. Mayor even began to go for walks around the house, which Nancy was truly glad about. "But so much labour has gone into your business," Harris shrugged. "Exactly. Labour. I'm so tired from living alone that now every day feels like a holiday. Yes, I don't have money, but my illness has finally receded. The woman I love is with me. My daughter married a good man. What more could you want?" "Maybe you're right," Harris replied with an embarrassed smile. "I wonder how Becky is doing," Nancy suddenly asked. "Don't mention that name," grumbled Harris. "Didn't she cause us enough trouble?" "I just feel sorry for her. She did all those bad things out of loneliness and resentment against the world and herself," Nancy replied. "You're too kind." Harris shook his head. "Everyone should have a second chance," Nancy insisted. Suddenly there was an unexpected knock at the door. The early hour didn't suggest visitors, as most of the village's population would be at work on a weekday. "Are you expecting someone?" Nancy asked her parents. "No, maybe it's the neighbours, but we agreed to meet in the evening. Everyone has their own business in the morning," Mum replied doubtfully. Nancy went to the front door and saw— "Wow! What a surprise!" she exclaimed. "There's been a lot of coincidences lately." "Don't tell me there's—" But Harris didn't have time to finish. Nancy opened the door and everyone saw Becky modestly shuffling from foot to foot. "Hello," she said quietly, too scared to look up. "Why did you come here?" asked Harris. "Well, Harris, why are you so rude?" Nancy intervened, cutting her husband off. "Maybe something's happened." "What does it matter to us?" "Please stop it," Nancy retorted. Mr. Mayor stared at the back of the room, uncertain of how to act. He had long forgiven his daughter for her past mistakes and desired to reconnect with her, but he was unsure how to tell Becky about Eleanor. He feared that his newfound relationship would be seen as a betrayal of Becky's mother's memory. However, he also didn't want to keep his first love in the secret from Becky. "What's wrong, daughter?" he finally asked, daring to step out of the shadows. "Dad, I'm such a fool!" Becky suddenly sobbed. "Forgive me!" Unable to bear the stances directed at her, the young woman broke down in tears. Large tears rolled down her cheeks, smearing her expensive mascara. "I thought I could do it. And She attempted to explain, but her sobs choked her words. She covered her face with her hands, trying to hide her emerging weakness. "It's all right. Everything will be okay," Nancy said softly as she approached her. She gently hugged Becky, pulling her close. Mr. Mayor joined them immediately, aiming to comfort the troubled girl. "Why are we in the hallway? Let's move to the living room. Come on in," Eleanor said, smiling warmly at the guest. "Forgive me for intruding like this," Becky sobbed, beginning to calm down. "What happened?" Nancy asked. "Nothing that my father didn't warn me about," Becky shrugged. "Running a huge company isn't as easy as I thought. I almost foolishly ruined the business, pushing it to the brink of bankruptcy." "What about the board of directors? Weren't they supposed to help you?" Mr. Mayor asked, raising an eyebrow. "I argued with them all at first, and then everyone wanted a piece of it, and they started to break up the whole company." "So, you came to surrender?" Harris asked. Nancy elbowed him immediately, but he had already realised his blunder. "Dad, forgive me. I was such a fool, just impossible," Becky sobbed again. "Of course I forgive you, daughter. I forgave you long ago. I understand everything. I was once young and impertinent myself." "Thank you." "But there's one condition." The businessman looked at his daughter seriously. "What?" Becky looked at her father in surprise, clearly surprised by his words. "First of all, we need to settle all the problems to the end. I know that you and Nancy had a conflict, and I would like you to accept her." Of course. I've wanted to do it for a long time." "I haven't finished yet. I would like you to accept her as your half-sister." "What do you mean?" Becky interjected, not understanding. "Look, it's a long story. I hope you're old enough to understand it properly. Even before I met your mum, I met Eleanor. She gave birth to Nancy, who is my daughter too. So it turns out you have a half-sister that we didn't know about all these years." Becky looked at the woman she had despised not so long ago and shyly lowered her eyes. She now deeply regretted her rash actions. "Please forgive me for all those harsh words," she whispered. "I know I've caused you much pain. I promise it won't happen again." "Don't worry, I understand," smiled Nancy. "Still, it might do you good to work among ordinary people, to experience the demands of rural labour," Harris noted. "That's not a bad idea," Mr. Mayor agreed. "Let's make it a condition. 6 months of work on a local farm. That'll serve as both your probation period and a lesson." "I'll do anything," Becky agreed, bowing her head. "I'll try my hardest." "Hey, Dad. Working hard, I see," Nancy said as she walked into the office. "Huh? What? What time is it?" Mr. Mayor asked, setting aside his papers. Ever since he had to step back into the company, he had been spending more time in the office, sorting out the chaos created by Becky. "You've forgotten all about us," Nancy replied with feigned resentment. "It's evening already. Even the staff have long since gone." "Oh well, I'm coming now." The businessman began to pack fussily, occasionally looking for some papers. "All right. I knew you were doing something important. Here, at least eat, or you'll get skinny again," her daughter sympathetically offered, placing a container of homemade food on the table. "Thank you." After setting out the dinner, Nancy sat down next to her father. She really wanted to assist him, but she didn't understand the difficult economic intricacies of his company. And the only one who had some understanding in these matters, Becky, was still testing her skills on the farm. "Now, Becky, it's been 3 months. She hasn't given up yet." Mr. Mayor seemed to have read her thoughts. "She's hanging in there. She's doing really well. No one expected her to make it, you know. Not bad at all for a city dweller, of course." "You're both good. You're both strong," the businessman said proudly. "By the way, the repairs at my mum's house are almost finished. Thank you for paying for everything. It's so beautiful there. Just like a fairy tale." "Come on, you're my family. What kind of bills can there be? Nothing's too expensive for you." "And one more thing." Nancy smiled mysteriously, then lowered her eyes and stroked her stomach. Only now the businessman noticed the change in his daughter's figure. the noticeable roundness of her belly. After the wedding with Harris, things just happened. We didn't really plan it, but now we're very happy. You, my darlings. I'm so happy. Mr. Mayor jumped up from the table and hugged his daughter. The realization that their family was about to change made his heart flutter with joy, anticipating happy troubles.